Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is abandoned, betrayed and left to rot in a prison until he get help from his tailed beast. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Yelling, muffled explosions, the impact of different destructive jutsu shaking his entire cell, and the sound of clashing weapons woke up prisoner 810,119,471 from his slumber. Well, he was well aware to what was happening and had already planned his actions down to the letter. Getting up, the 5'4" prisoner began a series of stretches that worked all of the muscles in his body. His spiky, unruly and blonde hair constantly covered his face as he went through the stretches. After about 20 minuets of stretches, he felt content and proceeded to walk across his 9x9 cell to the heavy steel-plated door and put his hand on the lock. "Kaiten such plus Rukit, steel cutter," whispered the prisoner. His hand began to turn red with superheated chakra and he proceeded to burn his hand into the lock of the door. After the lock had been thoroughly cut, he went on to do the same thing to both of the hinges of the door, being careful not to cause the door to fall over. When he finished, he ended his jutsu and then put his ear up to the door and awaited the sound that would signal the first step to his freedom. Haruki was running as fast as he could. The sounds of the riot uprising woke him up, and his commanding officer ordering him and his comrades to hold the front line near the C-block mess hall made him nervous. He looked to his left and to his right and saw determined looks of his teammates. He just couldn't believe that 2 weeks into the Youth Hunter Nin program and he was already about to see actually combat. "I'm only 12, I hope I am ready for this," he thought to himself. He and his 4 other teammates were running down the surprisingly wide hallways of the solitary confinement wing when he heard his teammate Toji yell out in surprise. Seconds later, he felt a huge force crush him into the rest of his team and then everything went black. Haruki was slowly coming to as he noticed that he was no longer in the hallway where he and his team were ambushed but was in fact in what he thought was a janitor's closet. He saw a silhouette leave the room as he looked around and noticed the bodies of the rest of his team. Marks on their bodies suggested that he put up some kind of fight and stayed up after the initial ambush. While he wanted to go chase the son of a bitch that killed his team, he felt sleep and fatigue take him over as his eyes slowly closed. Leaving the closet where the prisoner hid the bodies of the youth nin, he ambushed. The sounds of the uprising were only escalating as more and more prisoners in other cell blocks were released. The prisoner adjusted the hunter nin clothing he scavenged off of his prey and began to run down the hallways towards the armory. Ignoring the individual fights between the prisoners and the guards that he found along the way, the prisoner ran for what felt like ages but was in fact only 25 minutes before he finally reached the armory. He noticed several guards that were tense and well guarding the entry to the armory. "How am I going to get past them while they are expecting something?" thought the prisoner. He was formulating several plans before a shout broke him out of his thought. "Hey Hunter Nin. You're finally here. We were expecting you to come get the weapon and resupply scrolls an hour ago." The guard he noticed was a man with spiky brown hair and in a standard Kyuubi Jonin uniform with no other special features about him, but the guard did not only lower the guard but signaled for the other guards to open up the armory door. The prisoner, not being one to look a gift kunai down the hilt, took this chance in fate and replied while rubbing his head in almost comic fashion, "Yay, sorry about that, but the guards on cell block B were having trouble in their sector." The tale seemed to be enough for the guards as they kept their guard down and let him in. "I should have figured as much," mumbled the guard as he and one of the other guards grabbed 5 scrolls in total and handed them to the hunter nin dressed prisoner. "Alright, these 2 are filled with small weapons, katanas and several batons. These 2 are filled with rations, medical supplies and a few mini water sources sealed into tags. Finally, this one is filled with stun, flash and explosive tags." The guard explained as one of the other guard was marking down what was being taken on a clipboard. The prisoner noticed an explosive kunai laying down on the shelf next to him and instantly knew his next course of action. But the swift swipe of his left arm, the prisoner now had the kunai and hauled ass for the exit of the armory and soon the exit of the prison. Surprised by the sudden action, the guards ordered the 3 remaining guards outside of the armory to stop the hunter nin. Rushing past the guards with speeds that number 10-year-old should have, the prisoner turned around and chucked the kunai at the door of the armory. Being in a confined hallway meant that the guards had nowhere to avoid the blast. In a blinding instant of fire, the 3 guards were killed and the other 2 were trapped in the now flaming armory due to debris blocking the door. After storing the scrolls in his hunter nin robe, the prisoner ran down the hallways towards the exit, all while throwing down explosive tags periodically. A few close calls later, the prisoner made his way to the gate only to find it, much to his surprise, in the control of the prisoners. The bodies of the guards and prisoners that died to defend or take back the gate were strewn about all over the courtyard and around the gate itself. Shrugging his shoulders, the prisoner ran past the prisoners, ignoring the shouts of said prisoners, thinking he was a hunter nin, and after running up the nearby hill, he turned back towards the prison, taking off his hunter nin mask and put his hand in the tiger seal. Seconds later, a little over half of the prison erupted in flames. The screams, explosions and yelling from both guards and prisoners alike filled the air. An unforgettable stench of burning flesh also hit the prisoner's nose. The wind caused by the explosion pushed his hair back out of his face, revealing a young face marred by two sets of whisker-like scars going across his face, but the most imposing feature, however, were the red eyes with slitted fox-like pupils. Satisfied with his work, the prisoner ran down to the beach, where he used as much chakra as he could to run across the calm yet endless ocean. By the time the figure made it to shore, the sun had faded over the horizon and was replaced by a full moon. The prisoner stumbled onto the shore and looked around for a suitable place to rest and talk to his host. Finding a good-looking palm tree, the prisoner laid down and closed his heavy eyes. Before slumber took him, the prisoner thought, "I now leave the rest to you, Naruto." Naruto came to with the morning sun blazing into his eyes, a pounding headache, and with every single muscle in his body being as sore as can be. Groaning, he rubbed his head as he began to look around at his new surroundings. "Where did Kurama-sensei drop me off at?" grumbled Naruto. He noted he on a sandy yet still relatively flat beach with no structures or people in sight. He looked behind him and saw a few palm trees and a tree line of oak trees that led into a thick forest. Stumbling up from his position from under the shady palm tree, Naruto made his way deeper into the forest, stopping to unseal items from the resupply scrolls as he needed them. After walking for several hours, Naruto came across a small inn next to what looked like a main road of some kind. The inn itself was built in a traditional style very similar to that found in Fire Country, he noted. This caused a mixture of worry and anger to stir inside of Naruto's mind. "I swear to the log, if Kurama-sensei dropped me back in Fire Country as a joke, then I am going to skin him alive and wear his chakra fur as a coat," Naruto said to no one but himself as he made his way into the inn. Walking in, he saw the front desk manned by an elderly lady who was mindlessly wiping down the counter. Looking around, he noticed that there was several people eating breakfast or drinking tea in the dining hall. Much like the exterior of the inn, the inside was decorated in a traditional Fire Country style, which only served to worry Naruto more. Gaining the courage to ask where he was, he walked up to lady and got her attention by clearing his throat. Once she looked at him, he asked, "Sorry to bother, ma'am, but do you mind telling me where I am right now?" The old lady gave him a skeptical look before replying, "Well, Kiri-san, you are at the Falling Leaf, a traditional Fire Country style hotel. I built it here because the town once was very popular with tourism from Fire Country." Naruto, being the curious person that he was, silently thanked Kurama-sensei for teaching him information gathering while he was locked up. "Once?" replied Naruto. "Yes, it seems like a lifetime ago when civilians and shinobi alike from the Hidden Leaf and the Fire Country came to Rikabi to vacation here," said the old woman, all the while she was staring off into the distance as though she was watching her memories play out in front of her. "Wait, did you say Rikabi?" said Naruto. He was both surprised and happy that he landed in Rikabi of all places. Naruto, with his enhanced memory thanks to Kurama, had read about the city when he was younger. They won their independence just 30 years ago from Forest Country, which had at one point leading up to the First Great Shinobi War controlled most of modern-day Rice and Grass Country. Their hidden village, the village hidden in the forest, had the most elite Anbu units in the entire shinobi world. Despite this, the villagers of Rikabi managed to win in numbers, counter guerrilla warfare, and from diplomatic pressure from the Great Five, who had sought to weaken the formation of a sixth great nation. "I just want to clarify, the hidden forest village is not within the borders of Rikabi, but within Forest Country. Rikabi as a whole was a tourist destination, and as such the tourism and film industry were their main sources of income. Their military was made of shinobi and forest Anbu, who had called this city home before their independence, a small navy, and shinobi that were trained at their local academy. Despite having their shinobi program being relatively new, they have managed to have a standing shinobi force of around 270 personnel and a small navy of about 25 boats and their crew. The force of 270 shinobi is absolutely nothing compared to that of the smaller nations, let alone the 5 great hidden villages." Satisfied with his information gathering, Naruto asked for directions into the town and for a cup of tea. After finishing his tea and being pointed in the right direction, Naruto walked down the dirt road until he spotted the city line out in the distance. Instead of walking into the city, however, Naruto walked off of the dirt road and walked for a solid 15 minutes before coming across a grass clearing. Happy with this location, Naruto walked on top of a large boulder in the middle of the clearing and began to meditate. Meanwhile, hours later, 2 people were walking down the very same dirt road. One figure was easily towering over the other at an impressive height of 6'2", his travel cloak did nothing to hide his huge muscular build. The other figure, on the other hand, was much shorter at 5'7", the figure resembled that of a young girl, and this was confirmed when the shorter figure spoke. "Kurama-sensei, why are coming to this village again?" Warning, even thought my writing skills improving. I am still very bad at rapping, you have been warned. The imposing figure glanced down at the shorter figure for a second without stopping, and also without missing a beat, replied yo Yujito. We've gotta track down this cool cat and get his info. Rap the now revealed Kurabi to the now revealed Yujito. All of this was happening while Kurabi was making hand motions. Unhappy with the way her question was answered, Yujito glared at the taller figure and replied by giving a kick far more powerful that a person of her body build should be able to give to Kurabi's shin. Would you for the love of the holy log stop rapping? Yelled Yujito. Kurabi, with a smile still plastered on his face, ignored both the comment and the kick but replied, hey lil cat, don't hate the playa, hate the game. He is basically trying to rhyme game with playa. That doesn't even rhyme, deadpanned Yujito. Never mind that, listen, our bellies ain't gonna wait any longer, so we should just run on to town. Exclaimed rapt Kurabi. Who was walking, rapping, and scribbling down his new raps into a tiny notebook at the same time. Why did he have to be the best sensei for me? Yujito mentally and comically thought to herself. Looking up, she did notice the sun had peaked for the day. She was broken out of her thoughts by his stomach grumbling. Having the decency to blush, she looked away while Kurabi laughed. So you're hungry too? Well, lucky for you, they got good food too. Rapped Kurabi. In fact, I also heard they have some of the best sushi. Kurabi didn't even finish his sentence before Yujito took off into the town in search of sushi. Well, now she's quite the handful, I don't even know what I'd do if I had to take care of two of them, deadpanned Kurabi. Looking up into the sky, he made his way into the town. Unaware of the events that this trip would unfold. Despite getting distracted by some yelling out in the direction that he had come from, Naruto managed to get into his mindscape with practiced ease. Instead of being in the clearing, he was now in a dark, damp, and slightly flooded sewer-like area. Rusted red pipes lined all of the walls, and anyone that had never been there before would have been lost, but Naruto knew his mind like the back of his hand. After walking 5 minutes through the maze, Naruto came across a barrier that was made up of thick vertical bars that resembled a cage. 4/5 of a large seal could be seen in the middle of the cage. Naruto walked right up to the cage and proceeded to do a deep bow. Kurama-sensei, you have my many thanks for getting me out that prison, but I am ready to start my real training now. For a minute there was only darkness and silence. Then a pair of blood-red, slitted eyes opened up in the darkness. As if on command, the darkness faded and revealed a huge 9-tailed fox. Its orange fur mangled and its teeth sharp enough to cut even the strongest of metal. Instead of attacking the small child in front of it, the fox gave a toothy grin and spoke. It's about time you got here. I was wondering what was holding you up. Before Naruto could retort, the fox continued, Naruto. I have already taught you 2 powerful taijutsu styles, both of which you know and practiced fairly well. Naruto only replied with a nod, which stated that he agreed with that statement. But taijutsu will only get you so far, you simply can't become a splendid ninja with just taijutsu alone. Meanwhile in Konoha, Lee was doing his evening warm-ups to do his post-afternoon workout so that he could do his late evening warm-ups and then get on to his midnight and post-midnight workouts before he felt a disturbance in the youthful force. Guy-sensei, I feel like a 1000-plus-year-old beast made of chakra just said, I can't be a splendid ninja with taijutsu alone. The older version of Lee was doing the same warm-ups as Lee, but stopped to hear his student out. Well Lee, you know what this means, you have a 1000-plus-year-old rival now. Lee burst out in joy. Yosh. I shall show my new rival that I can be a splendid ninja. Guy responded by hugging Lee. Lee, your youthfulness is why I founded that special project. You are my favorite pupil, Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Konoha was on lockdown because of their antics for the next 2 days, so that the citizens and shinobi could recover from that log-awful genjutsu of Rock Lee's and Guy's back in the mindscape. So I was thinking that Wu Kurama could not complete his sentence as a feeling of dread washed over him. He hadn't felt this kind of dread since he faced Madara back before the first great shinobi war. He felt like he had unknowingly set off a chain of events that might lead to his own demise. It was this reason that Kurama began to sweat profusely. Naruto, noticing the changes, began to voice his curiosity. Kurama-sensei, are you okay? Naruto's face cocked to the side, hand on his chin, and his fox-like features would have made any woman's will break at the pure cuteness that radiated off of his face. While it took a minute to shake off the feeling, Kurama finally responded, fine, I just felt a weird feeling anyway. Back onto your training. I believe that since you're more attuned with wind jutsu, you should focus on the basics of wind manipulation. Kurama closing his eyes and going into deep thought and took a pause before speaking again. If my memory is as good as my pervertedness, then I believe that cutting a leaf using pure chakra is the best way to start. Once that is completed, the same thing must be completed with a good-sized stone. Only after these tasks are completed will I teach you a jutsu. Trailed off Kurama. By this point his was clearly napping and ending the conversation in the process. Naruto couldn't help but deadpan at the 9 tails, openly admitting that he was a super pervert. Stupid perverts, mumbled Naruto. He was understandably not that interested in women at the moment given he was only 10 years old. At the same time he now understood the next step in his journey to become the very best ninja in the world. Ending his meditation session, Naruto awoke in the very position he started off at in the middle of the clearing. The only difference was that it was now night and the moon was once again full as its light covered the entire clearing. Knowing what he had to do, Naruto simply walked under the nearest tree and opened the food scroll. Unsealing a packet of dried meat, he began to munch on it while taking the occasional swig from his canteen. After becoming satisfied with his stomach, Naruto leaned over and picked up a fairly large leaf. Sticking the leaf between the palms of his hands, Naruto began to channel as much chakra as possible without putting out enough for sensors to spot him. After doing the exercise for 15 minutes, he opened his palms and inspected the leaf. Noticing a small piece of the edge was wrinkled but not ripped made him sigh and mumble about how it was going to be a long night. Not being easily deterred, Naruto continued the exercise throughout the entire night. Taking breaks only to use the bathroom and have the occasional snack. With each failed attempt, Naruto made tiny changes in everything from how he summoned his chakra, the shape of the chakra leaving his body, and the movement of the chakra. Eventually he realized that as he imagined his chakra making a grinding motion, then he'd get the best results. He also allowed himself to use more chakra, and by the time the sun was almost halfway across the horizon, he had been able to cut the leaf. The edges of the cut were jagged and unrefined, but in Naruto's eyes a cut was a cut. He decided that he'd take the time to master this exercise later in the week anyway. After taking a bath in the nearby steam, Naruto decided to head into town to survey the surrounding area. Putting on the same slightly bloodied Kiri Hunter Nin attire made Naruto frown a little. While he really enjoyed the airy, yet still aerodynamic clothing, the clothes were not a perfect and snug fit, they were beginning to smell of bow, and the color scheme showed him off as a Kiri Nin. While this worked in some scenarios, it drew too much attention to him. Especially if any ninjas he met happened to know the standard uniform of a Kiri Hunter Nin. After finishing putting his clothing on, Naruto began the trek towards town. After walking the 15 minutes back towards the main road, Naruto stopped dead in his tracks as he heard a man yell nearby. Curiosity getting the best of him, Naruto took to the trees towards the source of the yell. The scene that Naruto stumbled on made his blood boil. He was witnessing 5 thugs dressed up in casual civilian clothes with katanas strapped to their hips, beating up an elderly man and what looked like his grandson. In between the crying and the yelling from the grandson and old man respectively, he heard the thugs yelling, "You just had to give us your money and we would have left you alone, old man. We didn't want to do this, but you had to play the hero." And Naruto even heard one of the rougher looking thugs say, "I'm going to enjoy hearing the kid squeal like a pig." Naruto, having heard enough, made his presence known but throwing a rock the size of a baseball at one of the thugs. Naruto, being trained by a 1,000-year-old chakra beast that knew a thing or two, had a pretty good aim when it came to throwing. This was made evident by hitting one of the thugs square in the head, knocking him out. Among the 4 remaining thugs, confusion spread. "What the hell?" yelled all 4 thugs. He took advantage of the confusion and rushed the first thug and threw several surprisingly powerful right and left hook punches towards the nearest and weakest looking thug. The thug managed to raise his arms in a defensive stance and block the last couple of punches. Seeing that his attack didn't achieve the ultimate success he wanted, Naruto went in with a sweeping kick that took the thug off of his feet and sent his head directly into a rock that was below him. Naruto wasn't able to celebrate his small victory as the remaining thugs attacked at once. Being the smaller 10-year-old he was, Naruto used his nimble body frame to his advantage as he dodged each strike that came his way. "Stand still, you little shit," yelled one of the thugs. Naruto smirked as he could tell that each thug was getting very impatient with him. His smirk, however, died as each thug began to draw their katanas. Looking around frantically, Naruto noticed he was near the body of the thug he had hit with a rock at the beginning of the fighting. He also noticed the katana that sat on his hip. Rushing the body, Naruto quickly drew the katana and rose it up to block the overhead strike that came from the burly thug that was clearly bloodthirsty, if the log awful and bloodshot stare he was giving Naruto was any indication. Not letting this man scare him, Naruto slid the blade down towards the hilt of the other sword and caught his attack off guard. Taking advantage, Naruto drove his knee into the thug's leg. "Ah!" yelled the thug as he was forced on his knees in front of Naruto. Taking a slight and foreign sense of pleasure at his enemy's helplessness, Naruto spun his body to build up momentum and delivered an overhead strike of his own straight into the thug's shoulder. The thug screamed and tried to stop the bleeding in his shoulder for a few seconds before he fainted from the pain. He felt a brand new feeling that he had never felt in his life before he felt happy taking this man's life. He had never been happy about doing harm to others even when he was mistreated in Konoha. He also took a moment to realize he didn't know a single thing about wielding a katana. Kurama-sensei never even mentioned teaching him kenjutsu, let alone actually learning anything. Naruto did not know where this newfound ability to wield a blade came from, but he knew one thing: he loved it. It was the sound of the remaining thugs running away in fear that shook Naruto out of his thoughts. As Naruto started to look around for the old man and the young boy, he noticed a small pouch on the ground. Picking it up, he realized it was full of Ryo 250 to be exact. Pocketing the money, Naruto continued to search for the two he had saved. He had finally found them cowering under the nearby cart that had various clothing items and fabrics of different colors. Peering under the cart, Naruto scared them both as they yelled and jumped back and then began to beg. Please don't kill us. Take whatever you all want. Just don't hurt us." Naruto looked on them with pity. He looked down at the coin purse and knew what he had to do. Tossing the money to the duo, they looked on in shock. What? They both looked up at the young blonde boy in front of them. Instead of seeing a sword pointed at them like the duo expected, they saw a hand extended out towards them. "I do not want to hurt you. I only want to help," said Naruto. His voice somber as he knew they had been through a lot already and it wasn't even noon yet. Naruto looked up towards the cart and continued. "I noticed you have a lot of tailor materials on that cart. Are you an actual tailor or are you just a merchant?" The old man, still shocked, only managed to stutter out his answer. I am a taught tailor out of the village hidden in the forest," said the now identified tailor. "Well, I am only a civilian. I have been making shinobi clothing for close to 40 decades now. I was moving to Kyuubi to make a new start for myself and my grandson. Pardon me for asking, but can I get the name of our hero?" Naruto put his finger to his chin and thought, "What could go wrong from telling him my name?" thought Naruto. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," said Naruto proudly as he comically puffed out his chest and proceeded to pound it. "Is there anything we can do for you in return for helping us?" replied the old man. "Those clothes you're wearing look terrible, filthy, and don't even look like they fit properly. I could probably fix you up something that looks better and fits better," said the old man as he already began to pick out tools and fabrics from the cart. Naruto rubbed the back of his head with a sheepish look on his face as he replied, "No, that's really not necessary, old man." Hey, what are you doing?" Naruto was taken surprise as the old man began to take Naruto's measurements. Looking at his tape measure, the old man memorized the numbers and scribbled them down on a tiny notepad. "Now what kind of clothing can I make for you? I can give you my take on the traditional Kiri Hunter Nin outfit, a personalized set of forest Anbu pieces. I could just do a custom outfit as well. The choice is yours." Naruto thought about his options for a minute. While the forest Anbu outfit really enticed him, Naruto knew he wouldn't stick around the forested regions of the elemental nations for too long. Then he remembered an outfit he saw back in Konoha that the shopkeeper obviously wouldn't let him buy. While he couldn't remember the color scheme, every other detail was retained in his head. "Well, if you could make me a pair of forest Anbu pants, but in a black scheme." Naruto paused to make sure the old man was getting everything he was saying, and sure enough, the old man was scribbling away. "And a jacket with good amount pockets for storage, and if you could make the sleeves blood red and the center the same black as the pants, that would be cool too," finished Naruto. "Now for the jacket, I have a special material that, while it's thin and breathable, it is also one of the strongest materials around," said the old man. Naruto, putting that into consideration, agreed, but then had another thought. "Hey, if you use that material, would it be possible to add a flak vest to it as well?" The old man thought for a second before shaking his head yes. "I would like a flak vest with a lot of pockets for storage, and to finish it off I would also like 2 standard kunai and shuriken pouches." The old man finished writing before looking down at Naruto. "Alright, I can get that done in a few hours. Do you mind waiting around and protecting us while I get it done?" "Of course, old man. You have my word," Naruto replied happily, seeing as he just got a new outfit that would, for once in his short life, fit him right. He then remembered it was his birthday today on an abandoned island far to the southeast of Kiri. While Naruto was getting a new outfit, another blonde-haired kid was getting a gift of her own. Eri, meaning blessed gift, had her birthday coming up soon, and several of the ninja that were working directly under the 4th Hokage were giving her early birthday gifts. Speaking of the 4th Hokage, he was standing on a nearby roof and gave a sad smile as he saw Eri cheer as she opened a pack of steel kunai. Looking back at his life, he realized he was known as the strongest and deadliest ninja of his time and the strongest leader in the history of his village. Yet he was unable to protect his son and he was scared of his wife. He always was when it came to October 10th. He could only think that he had no other option than to temporarily abandon his infant son after the sealing had been finished, so as a result his wife takes it out on her husband instead, but he had to make a choice: lose his entire family or prolong the meeting of his only son. He didn't want to do either, but in the end figured it was for the best. At least Kahona would take care of him. However, his wife always tended to get pissed off easily this time of year. He also began to smile as he thought about how Eri came into their life. A drunken night of passion between him and Kushina led to Eri's birth. The fact his birthday is October 13th is a complete coincidence. Despite being trained in the shinobi art since last year, she is 6 as of right now. So she is 4 years younger than Naruto. Everyone has kept her brother's existence a secret. Normally Rin would keep Yuri away from Kushina as she normally balled a storm through the entire night of the 10th. And unfortunately for him his student was off on a reconnaissance mission for the latest news. This meant that no one would keep Yuri from Kushina without keying off Yuri that something is amiss. His blonde hair and face, but her attitude was completely her mother's. And her hair was just as long too. She also had her mother's huge Suiton affinity and his affinity for wind, slightly, but unfortunately, she had no affinity for lightning. He always figured it all went towards his son instead. Of course he feared that Yuri would be much better of a ninja than her older sibling. She had to be as he has been training her for a year. He is hoping to teach only his son the Hiraishin no jutsu to make up for the lack of family in his life. But the few reports from his spy network in Kahona show that he was dead last in his class and is a troublemaker. He hopes that after the last year he might have changed. His student on recon is supposed to pick up the latest information on his son and she should be here in a couple of days. He was brought out of his thoughts when his student landed swiftly nearby. "What are you doing here, Rin?" This is the worst he had ever seen her in ever since Obito's death. She had clearly been running non-stop and was crying. The informant in Kiri gave me information about Naruto-san. And he is rare at this. Minato snatched the paper from her out of curiosity, wondering what could make her not be able to read it to him directly. He looked down and started reading. On the third paragraph he froze. After checking several sources and doing a few personal investigations, it was determined that a Uzumaki Naruto was captured by Kiri forces under unknown circumstances, was briefly interrogated, and then detained in the maximum security prison known as Chimamire no Shima, where he was kept for 7 months in solitary confinement. He was later involved in and killed in a violent uprising that led to the mass breakouts of approximately 58 criminals of Kiri, the death of 74 Kiri guards, 23 Kiri hunter nin, 142 prisoners, and the destruction pillaging of roughly 48% of the prison. His cause of death was confirmed as death by one of the many explosions that erupted from within the prison itself. Minato couldn't continue reading the report, dropped to his knees, and sobbed. He cried for 2 reasons. One was the fact he had just lost his son, and 2 he was scared about what his wife would do to him. Rin looked on in concern, but was quick to get straight to the point. "Sensei, what should we do now?" Minato eventually recovered and looked down at his last remaining child still celebrating like nothing has happened. His eyes grew cold and it was at this moment he knew what he had to do. Get the other shinobi together. We're going to focus all of our resources on training Eri, take 2 or maybe 3 years for that purpose, and then we go back to Konoha to reclaim my position. Rin could only nod dumbly. She wasn't used to this Minato. Sure, he was calm and serious when he needed to be, but never this cold. She just hoped this news wouldn't change him and consume him in hate. She ended her thoughts by going further into the semi-ruined city to spread the word about the meeting. And Minato has maybe 15 to 25 shinobi with him. Most of them would have been his personal bodyguard Anbu in the manga and anime. Kakashi would not have been with them because he was still affected pretty hard by Obito's death. Back in Rakubi Forest, Naruto was walking alongside the cart as he inspected his new outfit. His black camo print flak fit nicely over his thin blood red and black jacket. His black forest Anbu pants looked good with the rest of the outfit as its black camo print would help him blend into dark or natural backgrounds or environments. While his sandals and 2 back pouches were standard for shinobi, it still looked good with the rest of the outfit while still being effective in battle. A last-minute request he made was also granted as he added a slot in the jacket where he could keep his newly acquired katana in its sheath by his side at all times. Naruto was broken out of his thoughts as a gate guard was questioning the old man about his purpose for coming into the town. "Dang, we got into town fast," thought Naruto. After the old man flashed his papers and vouched for Naruto by claiming him as his hired sword. Well, the guard gave a questioned look at such a young child being a sellsword but accepted it as the truth nevertheless. When the trio got to the main town square, the old man surprised Naruto by almost immediately parting ways. "Well, Ninja-san, thank you for everything, but we need to part ways. Our paths was splitting for now, but they will converge again soon." And without another word Naruto lost the old man's cart in the ever-growing crowd. "All old ma man," Naruto yelled. After several minutes of trying to find the old man, Naruto decided to give up. He was jumping from roof to roof trying to find the old man. On the last jump before he was gonna stop on the next roof over. However, Naruto saw a slim figure about the same size as him flying towards him at breakneck speeds. Seconds later, blackness. "Oh, what the hell?" mumbled Naruto as his head was killing him. "What the fuck was that?" the figure yelled. Naruto looked over and noticed that he hit a blonde girl that was about his age. She is wearing a blue, purple, and black suit that had a very snug fit. As she shook her head to try to ease her own headache, he noticed her hair was tied into a long ponytail with training bandages. As she eventually came to and she looked around, he noticed she had a very angelic face. With dark brown eyes that seemed to draw him in. That weird force that seemed to be drawn him and was broken as she stood up and started speaking. "Watch where the fuck you're going, you idiot," yelled Yujiro. Her once angel-like features were changed to that of pissed off. Despite only being 10 years old, she had mastered the pissed off face to perfection. Being in the middle of a busy street meant that this was beginning to cause a huge scene among the civilians. "Do you have any idea what you are doing, or are you just a fool who thinks that he can play ninja?" Naruto also got up and responded in the only way he knew how. He lightly picked his nose and flicked away what he had on his finger. He looked up at this angry girl with lazy eyes and replied, "You say something." Yujiro blinked as she processed what this little civilian kid said to her. When she finally understood what she said, her cheeks became red with anger. "You little shit, I will kill you." She began flashing through hand signs to fire off a jutsu. Civilians began to back up at a fast pace in order to avoid the jutsu that was about to be fired off. Naruto began to back away slowly. When she finished the hand sign, she yelled fire style. "Fireball jutsu." She put her hands to her mouth and a decent-sized ball of fire erupted from her mouth. The fireball was spiraling towards Naruto and he could only do one thing. "Fuck," said Naruto as he was unintentionally trapped between civilians and the urban surroundings he found himself in. He closed his eyes and waited for the fireball to hit him. Naruto was waiting for the giant fireball of death, destruction, and unhappiness to hit him. His eyes were closed, but he could feel the heat from the jutsu getting stronger and stronger. Suddenly he heard someone shout water style. "Wild bubble wave." Naruto then felt himself get soaked by an unrelenting wave of tiny condensed bubbles. He used his chakra to stick to the ground in order to not get washed away by the jutsu. After a few seconds he noticed the jutsu had ended. As he opened his eyes he noticed that the fireball had been extinguished, his attacker had been incapacitated, and that a huge muscular giant of a man had his attacker in a headlock. As he stumbled up he began to pick up on their conversation. "Yo Yujiro. What have I told you about fighting random people?" said the huge man as he bonked the young girl. "But B-sensei. This idiot ran into me. Besides, he did not even apologize." She pointed her finger towards Naruto who was whistling casually. "But Yujiro, is that a good reason to use your jutsu? When bro and I started to train you we told you to use it wisely. I have no choice but to ground you from jutsu training for 2 months. Yujiro's eyes were the size of dinner plates as they processed what she heard. "TW 2 whole months, what am I supposed to do for 2 months? Her focus went back to the boy who she thought caused all of this. "If glares could kill then I wouldn't have anything to write about as Naruto would have died right then and there." Naruto was about to shoot back a response when his sixth sense told him something was about to hit him from behind. He turned around and sure enough his face met the fist of an unknown attacker. He flew backwards into the identified bee as he was busy reprimanding Yujiro. They fell into a heap. Naruto was the first to recover and got to his feet first and was the first to speak. "Hey, what the hell is your fucking problem?" snapped Naruto. He looked at the big burly man who had punched him. Naruto idly noticed the 2 thugs that survived his fight earlier that day were behind him. As the huge man straightened up and cracked his knuckles he smirked. "Is this the boy that botched your job against that old man?" One of the thugs replied almost instantly, "Yes boss." The boss nodded his head before he continued. "The boy that cost us 3 good men, yes sir," replied the other thug. "The little boy that disabled 5 grown men with a rock and a sword." "Yes sir." The boss shook his head again before he began speaking to Naruto. "You little shit cost me a lot of money today, now you're gonna have to pay." Naruto was a little nervous. The same crowd was around them and Naruto knew he could not maneuver around them as well as in the forest. Before either side could make the first move, Beast stood in front of Naruto and had a serious look on his face. "You're gonna have to get through me. The best ninja in all of Kumo. Beware I float like a butterfly." As he was saying his signature line he pulled out a couple of short swords from the 7 sheaths that were on his back. "And I sting like a bee. 'Cause it's me, the killer bee." Before he could make his move several Rikabi nin jumped between them and had their own weapons drawn. Think of standard Konoha Chunin clothing but grey colors instead of dull green. "Kumo nin. You were allowed to enter the city with the condition that you avoid trouble. Now I don't know how they do things in Kumo, but here a street battle with civilians is considered trouble," yelled the Rikabi nin was clearly in charge. If his posture and Jounin vest were anything to go by, he was slightly confused but responded anyway. "Nah man, you gots it all wrong, see. We was just protecting this child, you see." B gestured beside him where he had last sensed the young boy standing. Yujiro was standing next to B now, also shaking her head yes to confirm his claim. The guard then leaned over to see behind B only to sweat drop. "What child?" That was all the guard had to say for B to turn around so fast that he might have been mistaken for the yellow flash. The boy was nowhere to be seen. Both B and Yujiro were looking around frantically for the boy to straighten their story. After a minute the guard had seen enough and had them taken to the guardhouse where they would reach out to a Kumo rep. To get these ninja off their hands for a fee, of course. On the city outskirts, Naruto was hopping rooftop to rooftop frantically trying to get the hell out of the city so that he could get back in touch with Kurama-sensei. He had finished the first step to wind manipulation and was eager to get back to training. I really hope I don't see those weird cloud nin again. Though Naruto. That girl was insufferable in the 5 minutes he was around her. After running for a solid half hour or so, Naruto returned back to the cleaning he had found the day before. Looking over the horizon, he saw that sun was on the verge of setting for the day. Opening one of his many pockets, Naruto opened the supply scroll that held the food and water. Summoning 3 energy bars and a bottle of water, Naruto quickly devoured the bars and took several large gulps of the water before being satisfied. Before he decided to meditate, however, Naruto took a rock that was the size of his palm and enclosed his hand around it. Closing his eyes and channeling chakra to his hand, Naruto heard a loud crack. He opened his eyes and opened his hand. Much to his amazement, he actually managed to cut the rock. Man, I'm just so badass, thought Naruto to himself as he beamed with pride. After his small victory, Naruto then made his back under the same tree he did his leaf exercise and sat down. Taking several deep breaths, Naruto began his meditations that he was all too familiar with. Within seconds, Naruto was teleported into his mindscape where he navigated the labyrinth-like maze that was his mind. With practiced ease, he walked up to the strongest and deadliest Biju that ever existed. Kurama-sensei, said Naruto as he went into a bow. I completed the first and second stages of the exercise you gave me. Naruto waited a minute before he saw a pair of blood-red eyes appear before him. Good. With those simple exercises out of the way, we can now focus on more advanced aspects of wind manipulation. Kurama took a slight pause before continuing. First, you need to get out of the area. You have already made enough commotion in this town. To prevent this from happening in the future, I am going to ask you to tear off a little bit of the seal. As he said this, a seal came to life on the bars that separated Kurama and Naruto. I don't trust you to handle yourself and stay out of trouble. Naruto was walking towards the seal, but stopped in his tracks to retort. What did you say? You might be my sensei, but you're just a big dumb fluffy fox. Naruto stuck his tongue out at the now slightly enraged fox. What the hell did you just say to me, you little shit? Roared Kurama. He was about to follow up his retort but decided to end the short argument. Enough. We don't have time to bicker right now, so tear off the seal now and we will get your training underway. Naruto decided to go with Kurama's order and quickly made his way up to the seal and reached his hand towards the seal. His hand was under the right corner of the seal and was about to tear off a tip and swore up and down that he felt the light imprint of a hand trying to prevent him from removing the seal. Naruto shrugged the feeling off and ripped off a tiny piece of the seal. Naruto got a sharp jolt of pain course through his body. He for the most part shrugged off the pain as it was nothing compared to Kiri's interrogation tactics. After a minute, Naruto looked around before looked at Kurama. So what did that change again? Kurama sighed before doing what looked like pinching the bridge of his nose. I can now read your thoughts, hear everything you hear, see everything you see, and feel as you feel. Naruto could only nod as Kurama listed off the changes that the slightly altered seal caused. So now that this link established, can I start training? Kurama could only roll his eyes as he shook his head at his student's dedication towards training. Yes. You know how to cut both a rock and a leaf using pure wind chakra, now you need to know how to cut an entire waterfall. Now go find a waterfall, figure out the proper way to master your wind training. Naruto left his mindscape and opened his eyes and found himself in the same moonlit clearing he had been training in for the past couple of days in. He decided to eat a few energy bars and an entire bottle of water before moving to the river to get cleaned up from the day's events. After he got done getting cleaned up, Naruto got changed and gathered the rest of his stuff and started to head west further inland. Meanwhile, in downtown Kyuubi, 3 figures walked out of Kyuubi's main police headquarters into the night. The shortest of the 3 figures was grumbling about a stupid blonde. The second tallest began to talk to the tallest and overall largest of the 3 people. You know, you are lucky that Kumo happens to have a political presence in the city. Other nearby nations are not on good terms with us right now. He rebutted. Yo, I gotcha man, but like I told you, it wasn't me man, I was just protecting the kid. Yujito just kept mumbling about the dumbest blonde. The diplomat just ignored Yujito as they walked through the somewhat crowded streets. Regardless, A-sama will not be happy to hear about this. In fact, I think you should make your way back towards Kumo right now. B looked like he was about to argue. Now B-sama, do not worry about your little friend, he is referring to his spy, not Naruto. I will see to it the intel is collected. I will also send it via messenger bird. Thank you. I have a feeling some important intel is coming our way. B and the diplomat stared up at the stars as they began to make their way to the northern gate. Yujito mumbling all of the way there. Meanwhile, in Yuzu Islands, in one of the destroyed sectors of the Yuzu village, a single building stood out. Its windows were lit and full of life, unlike the destroyed, dark, and lifeless counterparts. in a medium-sized room complete with a round table covered in papers, files, and scrolls. Two candles were bringing a decent amount of light on the 8 occupants in the room. All of Minato's most trusted ninjas were surrounding him at the table. Kushina had found out about her oldest child's death, and her reaction surprised him. She became determined to protect their last remaining child. She however became slightly colder towards everyone and to the world around her, almost like she had given up. It seemed like only him and Eri put a smile on her face from time to time. Shaking out of his thoughts, Minato began the meeting. "Alright, we are here to discuss Eri's training schedule and what else we are going to do for the next 2 or 3 years. The other ninjas all began to agree at once, creating a mass mumble of voices. Minato waited for the voices to die down before continuing his thoughts. "Now I haven't checked for her elemental affinity, but I believe it will be lightning or wind. Kushina has given her a wooden katana for her birthday and will begin to train her in the Uzumaki stance." Muttering of approval rang out for a solid minute before quieting down. "I will spend the first year of 2 getting her stamina and strength high enough to learn my jutsu." A long pause followed. "He is going to train an 8-year-old his signature jutsu," was the thought of everyone in the room. Kushina was busy getting Eri ready for bed, but it already knew of Minato's plan for their daughter. Minato knew what was going through their heads and decided to justify his choices. "I understand your concerns, but not only do I have full confidence in my own child." This erected some chuckles out of the ninja. "But Jiraiya-sensei told me of the Toad's prophecy." This caused everyone in the room to stop everything and stare at him intently. This caused Minato to rub his head sheepishly at their sudden attention. The frog sage told him about a kid who would grow up without the joys of a normal child, who was born of a burning leaf, who could bend the sky to its will, and was the child of 2 great ninja. This child would bring about great change in the world around it, but it would be up to the present to dictate the child's effect on the future. "If anyone else can learn these jutsu, it is my daughter." The ninja all pondered what the prophecy riddle didn't understand the bit about the born of a burning leaf, but they all understood the child of 2 great ninja meant Minato and Kushina. The abnormal childhood was about how Eri grew up secluded from the rest of the world, and that elements of sky referenced the strong affinity to wind and lightning, which was very rare as the 2 elements conflicted with each other. Minato, the Indami Reikage A, and the Shodai Kazukiage are the only 3 recorded in written history to have such a elemental combination. Each one of those men have made a solid foothold in history. The only reason Suna even exists as a great power is because of the Shodai Kazukiage's usage of the 2 elements. He managed to stop a combined assault from the ancient hidden village of River Country in Iowa 9 years before the First Great War. Minato firmly believed that if anyone fit that prophecy, it would have been his children. The untimely death of his son, while sad, was necessary in his eyes, as it singled out his daughter as the child of prophecy. He couldn't even begin to imagine how hard it would have been to treat one child different than the other. Shaking himself out of those depressing thoughts, Minato continued to the final part of the meeting. "Rin, what else did you gather from our network?" Rin stood up and glanced down at her notes before speaking. "Well, sensei, the great nations are in hostile political terms with at least one other great village. With the exception of Kiri, who is still recovering from their civil war, but from what I could gather, Kumo is at odds with both Konoha and Suna." The ninja flinched as they knew that Kumo was very militaristic and always ready for a war. Iowa is still diplomatically open to Kumo, but recent events involving missing nin have soured their relations somewhat. This made some of the ninja smirk, as this meant the historic and powerful Brown Gold Pact might finally come shattering down. Rin took a pause before continuing. "Suna, however, is currently feuding with Iowa about an area known as the Fertile Crescent." The ninjas shook their heads in understanding. This region was on the northeastern border of Suna and southwestern border of Iowa. Since both the wind and earth nations were arid and had poor food production, this region had such fertile farmland that even when jointly occupied by Suna, Iowa, and several smaller nations, it produced just under 50% of what each nation needed. Recently, however, both Iowa and Suna have been making plans, defensive positions, and moving ninja to that area of the border, presumably to take it all for themselves. Suna also appears to have slightly worsened their relations to Konoha," continued Rin. This made sense as well. For several months, the Wind Dynamo had been sending mission requests to the Hidden Leaf in order to keep ninja available to be sent to the Fertile Crescent. Kiri has closed its borders completely and is under martial law. This shocked many of the ninja, including Minato. Why would they close their country to trade, especially after a devastating civil war just 3 years ago? Was the general thought around the room. And finally, Konoha, started Rin. Aside from the aforementioned relations from other nations, Konoha seems diplomatically involved with several of the smaller nations. Many ninja have been sent to Rice Country on search and destroy missions to find and kill the S-rank traitor Orochimaru. Rice Country is angry due to Konoha ignoring their request for these missions to stop. This also shocked the ninja around them. Search and destroy missions in a foreign land on this scale was unheard of. The only reason the other great nations are not acting on this clear act of aggression is because of their own events at home. Konoha also seems to be funding a company in Wave by the name of Gato Industries. While many of their business practices are questionable at best, it seems they have a special weapons contract specifically for Konoha. This made many of the ninjas shake their head. As a nation that promotes peace, if you step on the innocent people of the world to fight for peace, are you really fighting for peace or for self-gain? Forest Nation approved a Leaf embassy in their village with the help of Danzo. At this, many of the ninja frowned. They all knew his backroom politics tied with his lust for power was a dangerous combination. They also knew his past as a temporary forest Anbu might have also played a role. And finally, River Nation and Bird Nation approved an extension to existing trade deals. Other than that, we are all caught up. Rin finally put the scroll on the table and sat down. Minato stood up and called the meeting to a close. They each filed out of the room and made their way to the Uzumaki clan compound where they slept, trained, and ate. Minato was the last one to leave. We will avenge you, Naru-chan. A lone tear left Minato's eye as he blew out the candle and was gone before the light faded from the room. Back with Naruto, East Forest Nation 2 weeks later. Naruto stood shirtless, panting and clearly tired on a branch-cutting ride in front of one of the many waterfalls that dotted Forest Country's eastern forest. He took a deep breath as he put his hand onto the surface of the falling water and took a deep breath. With only partial effort, Naruto sent wind chakra through his palms and out into the waterfall. This caused the waterfall to be separated for a solid 7 seconds before the flow of water continued. Content with his completion of this hardest wind manipulation exercise, Naruto made his way back to his temporary camp he made in a nearby cave that was just big enough for his stuff and good amount of moving around room. The cave had more space in the back, but it was blocked off by a cave-in that had happened long before Naruto had arrived. Naruto had managed to set up camp here 2 days ago, after Forest Nin had chased him out of his last training area. Who would have thought a hidden village wouldn't like a kid with cage-like chakra reserves training to be a kick-ass ninja in their own backyard? Though Naruto to himself. As he made his way back to the cave, Naruto sat down and was digging for more food when his thoughts were ended as he heard the sound of several explosive tags hissing around the entrance of the cave. Shit. Naruto hurried to find a place to take cover and quickly dove behind a rock that was no higher than 4 feet high. Boom. The sound of all of the tags going off at once temporarily caused Naruto to lose his hearing. A loud and annoying ringing sound was all he could hear for a solid 2 minutes. After he regained his hearing, he heard several voices from outside the cave, which had been caved in again. "So that kid is in the cave, are we sure this time?" said one voice, most likely a male. "Yes, we saw him go into the cave and we surveyed it beforehand, and I can confirm that the cave is sealed off from both sides," said a much more feminine voice. "That was easy. I can't believe the regular nin couldn't trap this little kid," said a far more gruff voice. "I don't care about that. All I care about is getting this little shit to the council. They really want to have a look at this kid," said the first voice. Naruto stopped paying attention to the voices and started to gather what equipment he could from the rubble that was his camp. Luckily, some of his explosive tags, his outfits, katana, and pouches survived. Everything else was under too much rubble to be reusable. He began looking around right before Kurama woke up and activated their mental link. "Brad, what did I tell you about loud noises this late at night?" roared Kurama. There were 3 things that pissed him off. Uchiha, vegans, and finally waking him up from his slumber. "It's 2 in the afternoon," deadpanned Naruto. Naruto quickly got back on track and mentally yelled out. "Kurama-sensei, I am in trouble and could use your help," replied Naruto. Kurama quickly and skillfully reviewed his memories from the past hour and understood his situation. He finished the waterfall exercise. "I know he will do great things," thought Kurama. Thinking quickly, Kurama starting barking orders. "Alright, infuse a touch of my chakra and use wind style to top it to push the back wall rubble out of the way. Maybe there is a back exit we can use and then we will kill this pathetic mortals." Naruto nodded and quickly went through the needed hand signs before mentally shouting wind style to Toppa. A large gust of wind with faint touches of Kurama's chakra sped towards the back rubble. In a second, the entire back wall got pushed in and came crashing down with a mighty boom. He could faintly hear the 3 voices reacting to the sound, and they themselves were trying to get into the cave. Naruto quickly gathered his remaining things and hurried deeper into the cave. After about a minute, the cave's rocky surface began to smoothen out. Solid rock turned into chiseled stone. This interesting Naruto, who took a minute to stop running and examine the many pictures carved into the wall. After committing several pictures to memory, Naruto continued on. For 10 minutes he ran down a complex network of halls and great rooms. By now he had identified the place as some kind of temple. The artistic words and pictures carved into the wall and floor referred to storms and gods too many times for Naruto to not discount the idea of some kind of storm god. "That's just crazy, don't people know that the holy log is our one true god?" thought Naruto to himself. Naruto finally came across two large wooden doors. The iron fittings, hinges, and handles seemed about ready to fall off of the wooden doors. Naruto shrugged his shoulders and used all of his strength, which for a kid his age was a lot, and opened the doors. He came across a huge open chamber. There was a large pedestal on the back wall, and the rest of the chamber was open, presumably to allow people to gather inside and worship their god. Two small waterfalls came down from the ceiling and created two separate streams that flowed to the pedestal-like structure and ended in a moat that separated the pedestal from the rest of the room. The two sections of the room were however connected by a small stone bridge. The artistic wall design carried into the main chamber from the hallways and was no different from the other rooms aside from the pedestal, the stream's moat, and its sheer size. After finishing gawking at the room, Naruto made his way towards the pedestal but was stopped by a loud rumbling sound. The entire room began to shake violently. Shit, is that an earthquake? Thought Naruto. He was quickly knocked down to his feet and frantically looked around to find the source of the sudden movement. Hearing heavy footsteps behind him, Naruto looked on in shock as two large stone golems making their way towards him. "Oh, you have got to be fucking kidding me right now," yelled out Naruto in frustration. He didn't have time to continue his rant as one of the golems slammed its giant hand down on Naruto. Using his agility, he rolled to his right to avoid both golems. He pulled out his katana and began using hit and run tactics, trying to find a weak spot in their defense. After dodging and attacking for what seemed like hours, but was only 10 minutes, Naruto slid under one of the golems and noticed a small flashing seal. The seal had the kanji for earth. Then suddenly Naruto got an idea. Looking past the golem, Naruto noticed that it was near the moat. He was about to use a wind style to top it to push it into the moat, but his hand went through hand seals he was unfamiliar with. After finishing the seal, Naruto put his hand to his mouth in the tiger seal and a short but condensed ball of water shot towards the golem. What the hell, Kurama-sensei never taught me water jutsu, thought Naruto. But nevertheless his plan worked as the golem stumbled back and fell into the moat. He couldn't celebrate for long as the second golem was right on top of him. Rolling left, Naruto took out two explosive kunai and hoped for the best. He jumped onto the arm of the golem as it came in for another smash into the ground. Quickly running up its arm, he stuck both kunai into the shoulders of the golem. It began shaking, trying to get him off of it. Naruto, trying to get one more attack in, stabbed his katana into the head of the rock golem. He then heard what he thought sounded like a screech but ignored it in favor of jumping off. After he was a safe distance away, Naruto activated the explosives and sent the golem flying in pieces. "Great, there went my katana," mumbled Naruto to himself. Taking a second to catch his breath, Naruto finally made his way up to the pedestal. After walking up about 30 steps, Naruto came across an altar which held 3 items. The hilt of a katana, a small scroll with a gold engraving, a sword that had blue, silver, and gold rocks embroidered on it, and a larger scroll with gold, white, and blue lining, and both seemed to have yellowed with age. Curiosity taking the better of him, Naruto grabbed the hilt of the katana and examined it. It was gold-plated including the guard and was finely crafted. It had a white cloud towards the top of the guard, several yellow lighting bolts pre-treated out of the cloud making their way down the hilt and finally struck into what looked like a raging ocean at the bottom of the hilt. Naruto mentally complimented the crafter of this hilt for putting such a beautiful scene on a 1-foot piece of metal. Now if only it had a blade, thought Naruto. As if on command, he felt the hilt suck some of his chakra and in an instant the white cloud lit up lightly. And he heard a whooshing sound erupt from the hilt. "What the hell?" yelled Naruto. He tried to drop it, but something told him to look closer at it. Peering at the top, he noticed the air distorted above the hilt. It took him a moment to realize that a blade of pure wind had formed above the hilt. "Oh my lord, this is so amazing," yelled out Naruto in excitement. After playing around with the blade for a minute, Naruto decided it was time to leave. Cutting off his chakra to the sword, he watched in amazement as the blade vanished. Pocketing the small scroll and slinging the large one across his back, Naruto began to make his way back to the large doors. "Not so fast there, you little shit." Naruto peered across the room to see the 3 forest Anbu that had trapped him here in the first place. The female of the group decided to speak. "We spent an hour at least looking for you, child, and you're in here swinging a hilt." Naruto twitches at being called a child and was about to remark, but was interrupted by the apparent leader of the trio. "Whatever, let's just get him back to the village. I'm tired of this stupid kid already." He jumped across the hall and attempted to grab Naruto. However, Naruto panicked and put his katana up to the chest of the forest Anbu. "What the hell do you ugh?" He couldn't finish his sentence as the wind blade materialized and went straight through the armor and flesh of the ninja. He dropped Naruto to the ground and began putting pressure on his wound. Time seemed to slow down for the 2 other forest Anbu as they ran towards their downed leader. They saw the kid recover first and to their horror, he decapitated their leader with what they now identified as a blade of pure wind. "What? Though only Sunanin knew that wind technique," the female forest nin mentally yelled. She was shaken out of her thoughts as the large member of their team yelled, "Get out of here and inform the leader about this." I'll hold him off. The female member seemed to hesitate before he yelled again. Just go. He'll try to capture him. She nodded with conviction and ran out of the room towards the exit. Now it's just you and me, you little shit. Sneered the remaining forest Anbu. While he was looking back at the female member leave the area, Naruto fired off another wind style. To top it towards the Anbu, but he was prepared and raised a earth wall in his defense. The nin smirked in confidence as he sensed Naruto staying in place and swinging his sword in what seemed like frustration. He lost his smirk when he felt a blade of chakra flying towards his wall at an incredible speed. Oh shy, the wall could not withstand the blade of wind chakra and completely shattered. The forest Anbu was blown back and tumbled a good 14 feet before he gained his footing. Sliding to a stop, he readied his kunai and got ready for the blonde's next assault. All he felt was a breeze of wind. He looks down and to his horror, he saw a large gash going from his lower stomach all the way up to his left shoulder blade. His body not able to handle the damage failed on him as he dropped right where he stood. He looked up at the blonde monster in front of him and whispered "How." He coughed up a bit of blood as he was on the verge of dying. Then the blonde said the last words he would ever hear and would piss him off to no end. "Honestly, I have no idea," replied Naruto. As he finished his sentence, he had a sheepish expression on his face. Eventually he decided to end the poor man's suffering and stabbed the blade right through his heart. He died without making a sound. After scavenging some supplies from the two fallen ninja, Naruto noticed an ID card on both of them that explained how they were easy to beat. They were just Anbu in training, no stronger than a Chunin. That sucks. I had, though I was awesome enough to kill a couple of Anbu without trying. He got up and left the temple. Exiting the cave, Naruto took in the sunlight and decided that he was not welcome in forest country no more. He decided to head north to see what more training he can do with these items he got from the temple. She had been running non-stop for the past 20 hours at full speed for fear that he was following her. Her shadow propelled through the moonlight and her breath was ragged and inconsistent, whether it was due to fatigue or fear she wasn't sure. She never turned back after Ro told her to inform their superiors about the kid with cage-level chakra near the village hidden in the forest. This mission is just a C rank, they said. You shouldn't encounter any resistance. The tears had long since dried and left streaks in her skin, and her face was puffy from the crying. She was so into her thoughts that she almost didn't process that she had arrived at the gates of the hidden forest village. She ran past the gate and ignored the yelling from the guards for her to stop. She needed to tell her superiors so that her team's deaths were not in vain. Hopping from rooftop to rooftop and outrunning the growing number of ninja trying to catch her, she saw the window that led to her superior's office. Taking one last breath, she jumped through the window, did a roll, and stood at attention next to a person who was in a meeting with her superior. "Sir. Team 2 reporting from C-rank capture mission." Her superior, a grizzled old man who looked as frail as a leaf but still in standard forest Anbu attire, gave her a hand wave to tell her to relax. His short thin grey hair blew due to the breeze coming in from the cold night's air. He glanced around the room and responded calmly, "If that is so, then where is the rest of the team? And if I recall correctly, you are merely a trainee and not the team leader." Her breath still ragged, she managed to wheeze out, "That is true, Kugo-sama, but she faltered with her words, I'm the last surviving member of Team 2. Instead of looking shocked to hear of her team's demise, he merely furrowed his eyebrows in thought and gave her a hand gesture to explain herself. She had stumbled on her words. We cornered the kid in his camp that he had made in a cave. After caving in the cave's entrance, we heard a loud crash from within the cave, and Ro used his earth justu to clear a path for us to enter the circa." She was interrupted by the man standing next to her. "I am sorry to interrupt. Does this involve that strange boy that was caught trespassing in the village?" Having been interrupted in her conversation with her superior, the Anbu looked over at the third party and was about to retort when she noticed it was, in fact, the leader of the hidden forest village, the Refugee. She interrupted her superior's meeting with the village leader and didn't even know it. Why, yes, it was. She bowed down to the man who, while older than her, was younger compared to her superior. While his hair had some gray in it, you could tell he was still in his prime. "I am sorry for interrupting you meeting, Refugee-sama." He merely smiled and waved her off and saying, "Do not worry about that, young one. An incident involving the death of one or more of my ninja is important enough to interrupt a meeting. Now please continue on with your story." She got up from her bow and continued where they had left off. "Yes sir, anyway, we entered the cave and saw that a second cave-in had been cleared out and had opened a path that led deeper into the cave. Eventually, the natural cave surface turned into smooth chiseled stone. It looked like a temple of some sort, with all of the writing and pictures carved into the stone." She noted that her superior and the Refugee shared a glance when she said temple. "We scoured the temple searching for the boy and we spent what felt like an hour. Then we heard a faint explosion and sounds of fighting. We followed the sounds but they eventually died out, but we had a general direction and went that way until we came into a massive room with a moat surrounding the edges of the room and that boy swinging a blade less hilt around like an idiot." Again she noticed they had shared a glance. We confronted the boy, but she choked on her words as she started to tear up. Isab wanted to get the mission over with and shunshined in front of the boy and held him by the neck. The boy grabbed that hilt and put it up against his Isab's chest, and his chest exploded. We tried to move, but the boy finished him off before we could do anything. I think he was from Suna, since the blade was a wind-style blade. Once again she noticed they had traded glances. Bro had told me to run and inform you what had happened. I heard his scream right before I had left the cave. She was freely crying at this point. Hugo, having taken in all of the information and seeing the girl wouldn't be able to say much more, nodded his head in understanding, stood up and walked towards the door, opened it and gestured for the girl to leave. What is important is that you completed your comrade's wishes and told us. Now we can evaluate this threat and deal with it before anyone else gets hurt. Now you must be tired, so go get some rest and take the day off tomorrow. You earned it. Wiping away the tears with her sleeve, she bowed and thanked both leaders and walked into the night towards her apartment, all the while seeing patrols search frantically for a spy that ran past the guards. Hugo and the refuge walked side by side towards the cage tower. They had already dispatched messengers to gather the council in order to decide what course of action would be taken. Of course, Hugo knew he would send his black ops to dispose of the boy after the meeting, but the refuge didn't need to know that just yet. Should we inform Konoha of this? Asked Hugo, knowing full well what the answer would be. No, we will keep this domestic for now and now push our fragile alliance with them by requesting help with one single boy. It was only recently that they finished their embassy in the Hidden Leaf. You know as well as I do what kind of threat that boy could be and what kind of power he now possesses if that ninja's story was true. Retorted Hugo. The story of the Three Kingdoms is not one that many elders, let alone the new generation, know about. And even fewer know of the blades. Trust me, the ninja was telling the truth. Said the refuge as he stared up at the beautiful starry night. A light breeze fluttered their cloaks as they walked. We will see what the council has to say, but I have the feeling they will want to harness the power he has possessed. Hugo nodded his head in understanding. With the current political climate between both the great and minor nations, it is only understandable. Each action anyone takes is like walking through a field covered in explosive tags, ready to go off at a moment's notice. But enough about this, let us enjoy the rest of this walk before we enter the shit show. Both powerful men nodded and walked towards the meeting hall. 15 minutes later, the sound of endless arguing was deafening. To say the least, 10 civilian council members argued with 10 shinobi council members about various political events and opinions. They were all so entangled with their arguments that no one noticed their leader walk into the room. Hugo instantly went into a dark corner to watch over the proceedings, and the refuge took his seat at the head of the table. Still no one knew he was there. He coughed loudly. And suddenly everyone shut up, all shocked that their leader had entered the room without no one knowing. We are here for one reason and one reason only. He stated. To plan our course of action involving the kid with the cage-level chakra. There were murmurs across the table, and the civilian side looked visibly confused as they didn't fully understand what the big deal was about some random kid, but decided to stay quiet. However, some new information has come to my attention that changes the situation drastically. How this piqued the shinobi side's interest, as it meant there was something or someone very powerful involved to make the situation any worse. It would appear that the boy has acquired a powerful relic of the past. He has acquired the blade of the Storm Kingdom, the Sutmufangu, the Storm Fang. As both Hugo and the refuge scanned the room for reactions, it was obvious that no one knew what he was even talking about. One brave citizen spoke up. Forgive me, Refuge-sama, but I have not heard of this relic. What is so important about it, and why hasn't our village found this relic if it is so close to the village? The rest of the council looked up at their leader with the same questions burning in their minds. The refuge sighed, then closed his eyes, preparing himself for a long night as the story was quite long. Do not worry, I will not drag it on too long. All the refuge knew going into this meeting that no one save for him and Hugo knew about the Three Kingdoms or the swords. He didn't expect them to ask for specific details. Why can't they just accept the fact that this boy now has a powerful relic and is a threat? He deadpanned before regaining composure and then started his story. Centuries before the foundation of the first great hidden ninja villages, and even before the foundation of the nations as we know them today, the lands were divided between three great kingdoms. The Storm Kingdom, Earth Kingdom, and the Fire Kingdom. These three kingdoms lived in a constant state of war, each fighting not only for some sort of territorial or political advantage over the other, but also for their own gods. The council murmured, confused that people used to worship a god that wasn't the holy log. Each god was represented in the name of their respective kingdom. The Storm Kingdom worshipped the Storm God, the Earth God was worshipped in the Earth Kingdom, etc. Throughout the era, for each kingdom had one battle that was turned in their favor, due a random act of fate that they thought was of their god, and on that spot, the kingdom erected an elaborate temple for their god as thanks for their help in the battle. And while legend states the weapons were created by the gods, it was more likely than not a master weaponsmith that created the swords of the three kingdoms. Whoever this man was, he created the Sutmufangu Chikuk Sheep, Earth Shaper, and the Hai no Hertsu, Fire's Burst. These three swords had elemental properties that can only be dreamed of by today's standards, however there was one catch: they were extremely dangerous to wield and difficult to master. The first sword to be created was the Hai no Hertsu and was used by the Fire Kingdom in the earlier wars to great effect, but it was also the first to be lost. No one is quite sure what happened to it, but all that is known is that the Fire Kingdom had lost it. The Chikuk Sheep was the second one to form, and it was used up until the final moments of the kingdom, and the tale states that it was destroyed in the creating of the modern-day Hidden Stone Village. As in, it was used to create the village. And last but not least, the Sutmufangu. Arguably the most dangerous sword of the three to wield due to its unpredictable nature, and also the most versatile. The sword combined three of the elements: water, lightning, and wind, whereas the other two swords used just one element. This was the last sword of the three to be created and the most mysterious, as it was never recorded to be used in battle. As the Rifukage took a drink of water after talking for so long, one of the shinobi spoke up. If the sword was arguably the more powerful of the three, then why didn't it see battle? Again the rest of the council looked up internally, asking the same question. Because it was trapped before anyone could use it. Spoke Kugo, emerging from the same shadow he had been in since the start of the meeting. The council members were shocked that he had snuck up on them, and some of the civilians even shit their pants. The temple and the swords were created following the defeat of a fire army, just a day's travel from where we stand. The outnumbered Storm Kingdom was making great strides in their latest military campaign, but was outstretching their supply lines. Right before the battle was a defeat for the Storm Army. A massive lightning storm completely wiped out the Fire Kingdom's army. In the aftermath, a massive temple was created in honor of the Storm God. The sword was stored within the temple until a worthy warrior could wield it, however, he would never be found as the Earth Kingdom launched a surprise attack on both the Fire and Storm Kingdoms and wiped out both of their armies, leaving the temple underguarded. One night the wielder of the Chikuk Sheep used a blade's power to encapsulate the entire temple in a mighty mountain, and using more power than he had meant to use, created several more mountains that dot the west and central part of our nation. After the attack, the Earth Kingdom was the only one left standing and ruled the entire world for a century before outside influences and domestic unrest dismantled the Great Kingdom. Over time, bits and pieces of the kingdom broke apart and formed the base of the modern-day nations that we know today. The kingdom's last stronghold and capital would become the modern-day Earth Nation and the Hidden Stone Village. The location of the temples had been lost to time as culture and geographic features began to shift and change with the passing of time. Kugo took a breath as the council processed the information they had been given. Their thoughts were broken when the Rifukage stood up from his seat. Now that we have some form of understanding of what we are dealing with, how should we proceed? Over the course of several hours, the consensus that they should try to capture the boy while he was still young was the most popular plan, and the Rifukage had Kugo send Tracker Nin to find the boy with only one stipulation. This had to be done within their borders. They couldn't risk running missions inside another country without permission. While Kugo agreed to this, he sent his Black Ops Nin to go outside of the borders without anyone knowing, of course. Kugo was walking back through the streets as the first rays of sunlight hit his face. He stared grimly at the sky and mumbled, "This changes everything." 4 days later in the Yuzu Islands, Minato was watching Eri go through her nightly practices with her katana. After learning that her mother was an experienced swordsman, number 2018, herself, she wouldn't stop bothering them until they got her a practice katana for her birthday, which had passed just a week ago. Her progress is extraordinary, to say the least, thought Minato as he watched her finish with a powerful down swipe. His frown faded as he thought about why she was training so hard. The loss of a brother she never knew has hit her harder than I would have thought. When she found out about her now dead brother, she ran to her room and cried non-stop for the rest of the night and come out a lot less carefree and serious. Well, for a 7-year-old, that means during the last time skip. Naruto is now 11 years old. Minato shook himself out of his thoughts and decided to leave his daughter alone, for now, knowing she would be safe with the 12 other guards protecting the place. He left the Uzumaki compound and hopped over and through a destroyed building towards the only building in the section of the town with some life in it. Inside the secret meeting room, Minato stepped inside the lightly lit room to the same large table, with maps and documents scattered about, and the same 8 people surrounding the table, with the only difference being Kushina being present for this meeting, as there was no point in watching Eri during the meetings any longer. "Alright everyone, we know why we are here. To discuss Eri's training, get caught up on events within the elemental nations, and to plan our plans for the future," said Minato, as everyone had stopped talking when he entered the room. Everyone nodded in understanding and got their notes ready for the meeting. Minato continued. "As we know, I will be taking control of Eri's wind elemental training, and Kushina-chan is watching over her suit and training." Again everyone nodded. "What we are also doing is having some of you guys watch over her katana skills, taijutsu skills, and her teamwork raid, Genma, Iwashi. I trust you guys to watch that, okay? Yes. Said the 3 members of Minato's elite guard. Now we need to talk about the events currently happening. Rin, you're up. Yes sir. Rin bowed and brought out her notes. Nothing too major has been uncovered yet that we did not talk about in our last meeting. She started. However, something has stirred up the Hidden Forest village as they have locked down the village and set up checkpoints all across the nation. My thought is that it is to prevent leaf ninjas from traversing the nation to get into the Rice Nation. Everyone nodded in understanding. It made sense that minor countries would help each other in such situations. News of Naruto-san's death has reached the Hidden Leaf. They are holding a massive festival in honor of the death of the 9 T-Tails. Said Rin in between sobs. The ninja around the table looked shocked, to say the least. Minato frowned, and Kushina broke a piece of the table off out of anger. Those fucking bastards. Yelled Kushina. The third is doing everything he can to shut down the festival, but he can only do so much. Continued Rin. She composed herself and continued to read off of her notes, not realizing that Minato's features were not as pronounced as the other people in the room after hearing about the Leaf celebration of his son's death. Finally, the Suna and Iwa border tension is increasing as the 4 Tails Jinchuriki was stationed on the Iwa side of the Fertile Crescent. This made many widen their eyes in shock. Such a blatant move of aggression that hadn't been seen since the days of the last great shinobi war. It was obvious to them that war was coming soon. Thank you Rin for the information. Stated Minato. Now we need to restate our plan so that we are all on the same page. Everyone nodded. We will stay here for 2 more years training Eri and then we will move back to Konoha so that I can retake my spot as Hokage. I'm sure the third would love to retire already. Everyone chuckled at the light humor. And from there we prepare Konoha for the war that will inevitably come. I have also decided to hold back on teaching Eri my signature jutsu just because I feel like she will not be ready in the next couple of years. Everyone murmured in response to that statement. However, that is not to say she will not be powerful by the time she leaves this island. Everyone smiled at the signature turnaround of attitude that Minato also seemed to possess. Now let's go get some rest everyone, we have a busy couple of years ahead of us. 2 days later with Naruto in northwestern Rice country. After traveling non-stop for 2 days, Naruto felt as though he was finally far away enough from the Hidden Forest Nation that he could finally train in peace. He had read the largest of the 2 scrolls along the way and it appeared to be a jutsu list for combining wind, lightning, and water styles to create the storm style, though it stressed the importance of using this with a team of 2 or 3 in order to do it right, and since he was alone, he just stored the scroll away, not seeing any use for it. He now went into his mindscape in order to learn about his usage of the water style earlier and how he can improve his existing wind style. The mindscape was a lush plain surrounded by thick forest. The sun with its ever-powerful rays beaming down onto the plain. The grass swaying in an everlasting breeze. In the middle of this plain rested a napping 9-tailed fox. Naruto marveled at this peaceful scene. The weakened seal allowed Kurama to change the mindscape to his desire. This peaceful scene was broken when Naruto screamed. Hey fox, wake up. Kurama was an amazing dream about killing off the Uchiha when he was jolted awake. You little shit, what did I tell you about waking me up? Yelled Kurama as he leaped towards the boy. However, the red bars prevented him from reaching the blonde. I will kill you one of these days. Naruto got a blush and retorted, oh, I love you too fox. Kurama sighed at the idiot and got straight to the point. I know why you are here, so let's just get on with it. You are very powerful for your age, I will not lie about that. Naruto beamed with pride. However, Kurama said. You need to be stronger. Those Anbu were not only weak but also underestimating you, and there will be a time when that will no longer happen. Naruto nodded in understanding, now going into serious mode. These next few months will be spent improving yourself physically, after that we will improve you. Why? About that, Kurama-sensei interrupted Naruto. In the temple I went through hand signs I hadn't known before and I used a water just to. Why is that? Kurama lowered his head and closed his eyes in thought. After a few minutes, he spoke. It could be possible that you have such a high affinity for water that your body naturally gravitates towards it, but that would be unusual as I have not detected it yet. I will keep monitoring that and hopefully, we can use it to make you more powerful. Naruto nodded his head in understanding. Now where was I? Oh yes, then we will improve your elemental jutsus, whether that is wind or water we will see as you develop. Naruto nodded. Then we will spend a few months trying to learn how to use that sword properly. Sure, you're good with a blade, but it is quite clear that the sword you found is no ordinary sword. And then we will use the last month or so to test your abilities by going bounty hunting. Furthermore, I encourage you to stay in the northern part of the lands so that you do not run into any forest or leaf ninjas during your training. Naruto nodded in understanding and then thanked the fox before cutting the connection. He opened his eyes to a small clearing in one of the few forested areas of the Rice Nation. He tightened the pouches on his uniform and the flak jacket and started doing warm-ups not unusual to the most youthful ninjas in the Hidden Leaf. I must become stronger if I am to survive and maybe exact revenge on the Leaf. Naruto did not know what this next year would bring, but he did know one thing, it was going to be a busy year. 1 year later, Southern Kuni, lightning. It was early morning in one of the countless mountainous valleys in the Lighting Nation when Naruto was standing at an impressive 5'8" and was staring down the remaining 2 members of a Forest Black Ops team that had been tracking him for the past week or so. They thought an attack at dawn would surprise him, but they didn't realize that he had been awake for 3 hours at this point. The 3 other members lay dead in various forms with a mixture of burns and slashes marking their bloodied bodies. If the 2 members were scared, their masks covered it up, but Naruto smirked as he flashed through hand signs water style. Raging waves. A torrent of water rushed from Naruto's mouth, flooded the battlefield, but then quickly dissipating, leaving the battlefield coated in a thin layer of water and getting rid of any dry ground through most of the entire valley. While the Black Ops were pushed back and drenched by the water, they were overall without a scratch. "Heh, looks like you're running out of chakra if that is all you do," sneered one of the Black Ops. The other, clearly the leader, chose to stay quiet, opting to try and think several steps ahead of his opponent. Naruto ignored the comment in favor of smiling from cheek to cheek for all to see as he aimed the hilt of the Sutmifangu towards the ground, used his chakra and a little bit of Kurama's to activate the blade, which the Forest Black Ops were more than aware about, but tensed up when the blade crackled with electricity, and much to their surprise the electricity flashed towards them, using the water on the ground and on their clothing from earlier as a conductor to increase the damage. The leader, being a battle-hardened veteran, jumped onto a nearby rock to avoid the attack, while his comrade was taken so far by surprise that he could not react quick enough, and he screamed as the electricity fried him from the inside out. The leader could only grit his teeth behind his mask, as another one of his comrades has been killed at the hands of this monster. Naruto, on the other hand, was enjoying the sense of power and control that he had while in combat. While he has yet to get a real challenge from bounty hunting and this renewed threat from the hidden forest, he understood he was fighting mid to high B rank ninjas at most and could be beaten by a higher ranking ninja in a battle of attrition. He decided to keep his opponent on his toes by using a wind style. To top it, to force him off of the rock and into the electrified water. However, when doing so he had to deactivate the sword in order to go through the hand signs, thus weakening the electric current in the water. When the leader of the team was forced into the water, his muscles started tensing and lightly spasming, forcing him to rely on half-ditch jutsu and his short katana for protection. Naruto smirked, having found out earlier this year he had an equally strong affinity to lighting. He was not nearly as affected by the electrical currents in the water. Taking out 2 kunai, he charged the slightly disabled Black Op. The kunai clashed with the short blade, and it became a battle of strength. However, the leader had one last spasm in his arm, which faltered his strength. This was the opening Naruto had been waiting for, and he took one of the kunai off from blocking the blade and went for a stab to his gut. The leader watched in horror and slow motion as Naruto funneled wind chakra into the kunai to increase its damage and sharpness. When the blade reached his gut, his insides exploded at the force of the stab and the chakra entering him. Vomiting blood, his grip on his short sword was non-existent and the second kunai stabbed into his shoulder blade. His mask fell off to expose an older man with a scar going down from his forehead to right below his left eye. While his last bit of strength, he spit some blood onto Naruto's face before embracing death. Taking out the kunai, Naruto wiped the blood off his face with his sleeve while grumbling about stupid forest Anbu, not realizing they were Black Ops and not Anbu. He packed up his things and began to walk away, thinking about the many changes that had happened over the course of the year. After spending a few months physically growing and preparing himself and getting stronger through exercise, Naruto began learning more elemental jutsu through Kurama. While they focused on wind-based jutsu, they also went over a few water-based ones as well. Unfortunately, Naruto didn't find out about his affinity for lightning until just recently. He had also tried to learn more about his sword and get better with it. Tried being the key word. The smaller of the 2 scrolls found in the temple had not writing on it, but Kurama assured him that it must be unlocked somehow and that he should just try to learn without the scroll. What followed was weeks of little progress and endless scratches and deep cuts along his arms as the sword's wind element and later electric element appears to backfire on him when training, which he covered up with thin black bandages, wrapped up the length of his arms, but it always works in the heat of battle, thought Naruto. He has yet to see or use a water move through the sword, but he was positive that it has one. He had also learned from the fox the basics of Fuinjutsu, allowing him to do the first couple of levels of sealing. The final change was his tactical mind. A year of avoiding forests Anbu and hunting lower level bounties has made him quite the battle tactician, as it has allowed him to overcome odds such as being outnumbered or outclassed in a certain field. No longer do his opponents underestimate him, as not only do Forest Anbu know very well what he is capable of for most things, but word in the bounty community was that a kid was taking bounties and news spread very quick about which region he was in and things like that. Naruto about to leave the valley when he was snapped out of his thoughts when 2 figures landed several meters in front of him. One was a large and burly man, while the other was feminine and thin, but around his height. Then he heard it, the rhymes. Yo 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 Tito, what have we here? A fighter who's lit like a lighter, said B as he moved his hands in a ridiculous fashion. Yujito just sighed and glared at B. What does that even mean? B not missing a beat, he beamed at his student. Yujito, not everyone can catch these fly rhymes, yo. Yujito and B were about to continue arguing, but were interrupted by an irate Naruto. Can I help you guys? Yujito glared at Naruto with hate and retorted, no, but I'm going to kick your ass for what you did to us in Kyuubi and for getting me grounded from training for 2 months. She rushed Naruto with her fist cocked, ready to punch him into a new fanfic, but before she could even move 3 steps, B had her caught by the wrist. Yo, not now, I have to tell a tale of mine too. Naruto looked in shock at how he realized that he was 9 Tails Jinchuriki, but wait, did he say 2? If she's the 2 Tails Jinchuriki, then that means he must be 1 as well, finished Kurama. Yujito looked livid and clearly ignored the meaning of his rhyme. No. I want to make this idiot wish he had never been born. She couldn't finish her sentence as B tightened his grip on her wrists, making her wince in pain, and then looked at her with fury she never knew he could possess. Yujito. This is a matter that is beyond you. No student of mine will behave that way, and I need you leave us, go to camp now. Yujito looked fearful now and looked like she was about to protest, however B's hardened look made her stop. I said now. With that she left the valley going towards the makeshift camp they made a few miles away. Naruto looked on with confusion, wondering what this possible Jinchuriki could want with him. He got into a defensive stance, and though he knew just by looking at him that B could defeat him easily, he would put up as much of a fight as possible. B waved him off. Nah, I don't want to fight you. Again the rhyme in his words was gone, making Naruto assume he was being serious. Slowly lowering his defenses, B began to approach him. B walked past Naruto and motioned for him to follow. They walked past the bodies of the forest black ops, and B glanced back at Naruto, as if asking him to explain. Naruto simply shrugged his shoulders and retorted, "Ma, they attacked first." They hopped off in the opposite direction of where Yujito went and jumped between the narrow valleys and mountains towards an unknown destination. So cut to the chase, B. Was it? What do you want to talk to me about? I know what you are, a Jinchuriki just like little Yujito and just like me, Naruto retorted. So what does that have to do with anything? You are by yourself, so that means you've probably endured the same pain that we have as well. The pain of being alone, being hated most of your life without even knowing why everyone hated you. This made Naruto pause from responding. He had endured that same pain in Konoha, it seemed like a lifetime ago, but it was always in the back of his mind, fueling his training and his desire to be stronger. He saw how Naruto reacted to the assumption and knew that he had indeed went through the same torment that he and Yujito went through in Kumo. Granted, the abuse has been dying out as B has been making bigger and bigger strides in the ninja world, but Yujito, however, hasn't made such a name for herself yet, and so he has been taking her on basic missions and away from the village when he can. While this has led her to become a bit spoiled, it has kept her away from the hate, so it was worth it for now. He was broken out of his thoughts when Naruto finally responded. So what if I went through that pain? That loneliness, it only serves to make me stronger. He knew that feeling all too well. It's how he felt until he found what happens when he has special people to protect. What I am getting at, Naruto, is that while that hate and ill will can make you feel stronger, it is the will to protect your special people that let you find true strength. Naruto looked over at B, his eyes widened. Is it true that something like a loved on or place could allow me to become stronger? He looked down in the ground as they were jumping from valley to valley. He had never had that kind of feeling before about a person or a place. It can be. It was the desire to protect the village and the peace that led to the first Hokage creating the Jinchuriki in the first place. While I hate him for what he did to me and my kind, I respect him for his reasoning nevertheless, said Kurama from their mental link. Naruto nodded in understanding to the words that Kurama spoke. If it made even the strongest of the tailed beast respect a man that captured him, it was clearly noteworthy at the very least. So while I have never experienced these feelings that you are mentioning, why the hell are you bringing it up? Spoke Naruto. His tone becoming increasingly agitated as he had no way of getting stronger that way as he had none of these bonds. What if I told you Kumo could provide these bonds? That simple sentence was enough to make both Naruto and Kurama widen their eyes in shock at the bold statement that was just said and the hidden message it was implying. I saw some of those ninjas died from lightning attacks, and a blade Kumo excels in the first one and is one of the best in the other category. It will provide you the physical growth you desire, and you will gain bond with its people, or at the very least the village itself, to allow you to grow in the ways you are currently lacking. Enough about that for now, we are here. Naruto looked around and saw they were on a large mountain overlooking a wide valley. His eyes narrowed when he saw a patrol of ninja with uniforms he couldn't recognize make a hand sign, causing a large rock to move, revealing a cave, and then the ninja walked inside, disappear into what appeared to be a hidden base. So it would appear the intel was correct, stated B, his eyebrows burrowed in thought and his hand rubbing his chin. bro needs to hear about this. What is that place be? Asked Naruto. If there was one thing he hated it was to be out of the loop of information. I cannot tell you now, however, if you were to say join Kumo and become a high enough ranking ninja, then I would be allowed to maybe tell you. Said B with a shit-eating grin on his face as he knew that would be the tipping point for him. Fine, let's go to Kumo. Said Naruto with a sigh. Worst case scenario, he would stay at the village for a short time and leave after gaining the knowledge about lightning jutsu. Well alrighty, if we leave for camp now we gonna be hella fine. Rapped B, indicating that the mood and tone of the conversation would no longer be serious. Naruto thought about just trying to kill him outright for that ridiculous rapping, but thought against it. Meanwhile, Yuzu Islands. While Naruto had a life-changing offer made to him, the family he never knew he had was having an amazing moment themselves. Eri had just finished the first stage of the Rasengan. She stood at an impressive height for her age, 8, at 5'3", and her blonde hair was now down to her mid-back. She had been given the first stages of the Rasengan by her parents as a birthday gift, and while 3 weeks seems like a long time to complete the first stage for her age, it was unprecedented. It was this feat that strengthened Minato's confidence that he made the right decision in taking Eri to train in Yuzu. While Eri was jumping up and down while Minato and Kushina embraced their daughter, some of the other ninjas stared with smiles on their face. Just a perfect family, nothing could be wrong with this picture. After a bit of a celebration, Kushina was walking down the coast by herself. It was a lovely night for a walk, and the full moon's light shone off of her hair. It also allowed her to reflect on her family and the changes that have happened in the past year. She had been spending most of the year getting her daughter physically ready to use her chakra chains, while her father has been teaching her the basics of wind and water jutsu. She trained non-stop, day in and day out, at first to avenge her brother and to be a great ninja in the name of them, both. Now it seems like that has changed. She has become very self-centered after years of training under both her parents and the several great ninja that left with her father. Kushina frowned when she thought of how selfish she has become. They recently introduced the idea of them going back and mentioned how Eri would have to become an academy student. Eri replied, no, I won't. Not only am I too good for the academy, my father will put me on the strongest Chunin team there is, right dad? She said with sad puppy dog eyes. Well, her father jokingly agreed if not to placate the child. Kushina did not agree with that behavior, but what could she do? She already lost one child, she didn't want to lose her second as well. Thinking about her first child brought a tear to her eye. She couldn't help about feeling sad about the baby boy she had never got to raise. She was not openly crying as tears fell down her face, she also thought back to how Minato reacted. At first, he seemed to be genuinely upset and saddened by the loss of his first child. He has lately seemed to harden his heart and decided to instead put all of his time into Eri. No longer does he cry over the loss of their child in favor of trying to prevent losing their second. It saddened her that the man she once knew was willing to sacrifice another baby, no less, to save him and herself, whereas she was willing to die right then and there if it meant her baby would get a better future. She knew full well how the Hidden Leaf Village treated people that were different than them, and she knew that Naruto did not have a good life prior to somehow ending up in a Kiri prison. She frowned at that last thought as she, without Minato's knowledge, took a few days to travel to the Water Nation and inspected the prison herself. Despite the entire nation being under lockdown and the prison being rebuilt and upgraded to prevent another event like the one a little over a year ago from happening again, she managed to sneak into the warden's office with ease. Of course, such an important event was well documented, and she found a massive list of everyone who had either died or unaccounted for following the event, and Naruto was on the unaccounted for side of the list. Now there were several explanations for this that ran through her mind, but the one she held on to for so long was that her boy managed to escape. Again her thoughts went back to Minato, and she frowned. If he wasn't focused of Eri or her, then he was focused on the stupid prophecy. He was adamant that Eri was the chosen child to bring either peace or destruction to the land, and well, she knew as well as anyone that prophecies are about as concrete as the water that surrounded the island, and that proved true when the Toad Sage spoke of a second part of that prophecy. The chosen child will rake around the lands like a great storm. Whether it is that of a calming rain or a raging thunder is up to the parents of this child. Recited Kushina in her mind. Mom! Yelled Eri. This yell had brought Kushina out of her thoughts, and she looked over to see her daughter bouncing towards her excitingly in her standard training jumpsuit. Think Og Naruto's jumpsuit, but like dark blue and slate white. Let's go training, Mom. She said as she finally reached Kushina's spot on the beach. Right now, but it's so late. Don't you think it would be better to rest? You just spent the entire day finishing step 1 of the Rasengan. It's okay, Mom. She said as she struck a combat pose. I've got endless energy, you said so yourself. Kushina chuckled at her child's antics and caved it. Alright, go get ready and meet me at the training grounds, I'll be there in a minute. Before she finished her sentence, Eri was already running towards the ground, happy to get more training in. Leaving Kushina to her thoughts even if only for a minute. I miss you, Naruto. She said before leaving to go train her daughter. Meanwhile in B's camp, Vegito was sitting by a decent-sized fire poking at it with a stick absent-minded. Her thoughts were on her sensei's behavior and that stupid blonde brat. She remembered they were going to check out a spot that B needed to look at before heading home to Kumo. B had seen something in a report they had picked up, and while she didn't know what it was, she knew it was important, and then he said he felt a chakra source that they needed to go see. He said it was that blonde boy they had seen in Kyuubi, and she knew that she had to go extract revenge on him for making her miss out on so much training. She tightened her fist to the point that the stick broke. Just thinking about the blonde made her blood boil. Her thoughts were broken when she saw B walking back into camp. Her eyes showed relief as it was quite late, but then they narrowed when she saw he was talking to none other than the boy she wanted to beat the living shit out of. She was about to move to attack him, but stopped when she remembered the anger on B's face when she tried that last time. She saw them talking and smiling, and B rubbed his hair in joy, but saw Naruto smack B's hand away in a similar way that she and B always interacted. A piece of her felt jealous of the boy. Even though she knew very little about the boy, she was watching this boy try to butt into her life and take her sensei from her. That was unacceptable. However, despite being hot-headed, she knew that she couldn't act on it now, it would have to wait. Yo Yujito. We're back and guess what? Wants to come to Kumo with us. B paused in order to find a rhyme. And I think that's fine. Yujito was quiet, but it was clear she was not happy. Anyway, we need to rest in order to be the best. I will watch first and then I'll weigh one of you up. Said B, not even trying to rhyme that sentence as it was very difficult for him. Naruto pitched his tent on the other side of camp as far away from Yujito as possible, and both kids went to sleep. B on the other hand chuckled at Naruto's antics and thought about what the meeting in the next few days would entail. In Kumo 2 days later, after an uneventful couple days of traveling, they finally arrived to the great gates of Kumo. Naruto stared in awe as he had never been to another great hidden village, with the exception of Konoha and Forest, which were met best. After getting checked into the village by the two eternal gate guards, Misaki and Machi, they walked down one of the main roads towards the cage tower. Kumo was built in a large valley surrounded by large mountains, with the cage's tower being a large, narrow mountain in the middle of the valley. The first tier of the village was on the ground floor of the valley and was home to the traditional Japanese-style wooden structures. This tier had the civilian housing, markets, schools, bathhouses, restaurants, and the arena which was used for the Chunin exams when they were in Kumo. The second tier was also on the valley floor but was higher on an incline, thus significantly higher up than that of the first tier. It held the shinobi housing, academy, clan compounds, and shinobi market. This tier also used traditional wooden buildings. The third and final tier was home to civilian noble housing, the shinobi archives library, the shinobi bathhouses, the storm building training grounds for ninja of all ranks to use, and of course the main entrance to the cage's tower. It was the only tier that had most of its building carved out of the mountain, with the only wood being used in the entrances of the buildings. It was also home to a massive natural spring which not only fueled the bathhouses, but also created a large waterfall that landed on the edge of the second tier, which in turn created a good-sized pond, which funneled water into a medium-sized river that snaked through the second tier, created a waterfall that fell to the first tier. Then the river led to a large lake where a civilian park was at. The river was the only source of greenery around the village and gave Kumo an additional sense of life. Naruto noted how each tier was connected via a large series of staircases, ramps, and bridges to get to the cage's tower. Marveling at the massive village around him, Naruto didn't notice the stares and glares being directed at Yujito. He also didn't notice that fact that she had separated from the group in order to be alone. While B had realized her absence, he knew she needed time to think and reflect on her behavior. Eventually, after an hour of walking and gawking in Naruto's case through the village, they arrived at the entrance of the cage's tower. Walking through unopposed, they quickly went through the large heavy wooden doors that led to the Raikage's office. Yo 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 bro, what's a hip in and a hoppin' yo? Asked B as he once again went through the annoying hand gestures that went with his raps. A, to not confuse his name with the letter and also same as the canon fourth Raikage, sighed as he heard his stupid younger brother's rapping, but when he looked up he saw a young blonde boy next to him. Despite being around the age of 12, he is 12, he looked like he held himself quite high, he had the look of an experienced shinobi, and that thought made him a bit sad. B, who is this boy? You didn't lose Yujito already, did you? Said A, his tone getting a little dangerous, making even Naruto tense up. Nah, you got it all wrong, you see, Yujito went home as safe as can be, B said as he waved his hands in a jokingly defensive gesture. And this boy, as you can see, is none other than the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Rapped, sorry, said B as he tried to rap. A's eyes widened in shock, the Nine-Tails. I thought he got killed in that prison riot a year ago. Thought A to himself. However, A composed himself quite quickly and responded. But why is he here? Then Naruto responded, because I wish to become stronger. Naruto paused trying to find the right words. A narrowed his eyes at that response. Ninja with a desire to get powerful for no reason are the ones that become the most dangerous. A was about to tell this brat to leave his office when Naruto continued. Not only is your village skilled in lightning-style jutsu and swordsmanship, B and Kur the Nine Tails told me the true way to strength is through bonds, and while I currently have no bonds I wish to create some here in Kumo. That response was something that A would have rather heard and he was glad he did. He turned to B and asked one simple question. How strong? B looked over at Naruto and then back at A. Honestly, I have not seen much of his skills in battle, but I have seen the aftermath. I'd say a rough guess of his combat skills somewhere around high chunin to low jonin, and his stealth is easily mid to high jonin, as he managed to escape me and several other jonin in plain daylight back in Kyuubi. He paused as if thinking about what his next words would be. I would put him in a storm training team to allow him to get access to the training he needs and to also teach him about teamwork to the highest degree. Then when a mission of decent level comes around and we feel he is ready, that will be his test to see where he goes from there. To PT him anywhere else would be a waste of skill and potential, also we would be wasting village resources and time teaching him stuff he already knows. B finished his assessment of Naruto and A nodded in understanding. Alright B, I trust you on this, and if this backfires on us in any way, shape, or form I'll kill both of you. B nodding jokingly knowing it was a joke, but Naruto took it deep bow and thanked him profusely out of his character to say the least, thought B. Now we need to decide on other things like where he will be staying for example. Continued A. We are low on housing for now, and he will eventually get old enough and enough money to buy his own place, but for now why don't we have him rooming with Yujito? Both Naruto and B gasped at this idea, Naruto because she hated his guts and would make everything awkward, and B gasped because he was realizing all of the funny shit that come out of this. Before Naruto could even argue, B yanked him by the collar of his flak jacket and ran out of the room. Thanks, bro, you won't regret this, you know, said B as he left the room. A, having no paperwork left, just turned around and stared out over his village watching people going about their daily lives. The sun starting to set, A started to leave, but to his surprise, there was a fresh set of paperwork on his desk. He started to cry, damn you paperwork. In Yujito's apartment 25 minutes later, Yujito was sitting on her couch sipping tea and reading a book called The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi, and while she loved the book to no end, she despised how the protagonist's name was Naruto. She hated that name with a passion, and she vowed that one day she would force that damn boy out of her life one way or another. Her thoughts were broken when her front door got kicked in. She screamed, her hot tea got flung in the air, and she threw her book at her assailant right before getting drenched in hot tea. After she saw it was B who had kicked in her door, she yelled at him and charged him, hell-bent on demolishing him down to the last atom of his existence. However, something behind B made her stop. It was that damn boy. Naruto. Sure enough, there he was, obviously trying to keep his composure only to fail and eventually burst out laughing at her misfortune. Before she could do anything, however, B said the words that made her heart stop. Yo Yujito. Say hello to your new roommate, yo. She looked up at him dumbfounded. What did you say? I said he's your new roommate, fool. You fool. Yujito stood there stunned. Her one place of peace, her sanctuary from the glares and the anger, was about to be the home of the boy she hated the most. Standing there, she watched as B and Naruto walked past her and down the small hallway leading to both the master and guest bedrooms. Opening the door, he beckoned Naruto inside and turned around and looked at Yujito. Oh, don't worry, Yujito. Before you know, you two will be friends. And with that, he looked into the bedroom and told Naruto he would pick him up tomorrow morning. This made Yujito hurt as she thought that B would not be training him no more. As he was walking out, B said in a serious voice, Yujito, I will also be picking you up later tomorrow after the academy lets out for the day. This made Yujito sigh as she really hated the academy. She had no friends there at all. And one more thing, if you bother that boy at all, I will be grounding you from training for 1 week. 1 week? Shouted Yujito. What if he starts it? Trust me, he won't start anything. If anything, I doubt you will hardly know he is even there, said B with a quip before moving away from the door, trying to close it, knowing the lock was the only way to close it now. Yujito stepped away from the door and processed everything that had happened. She picked up her book and put it away and then went back to room to take a shower, then go sleep on everything that had happened that day. All the while not hearing a single sound from the guest bedroom. Meanwhile in Yuzu, in the same building that housed every other meeting, the same group of ninjas from the last meeting were gathered around the table with notes, maps, and documents scattered about. Minato started the meeting when everyone was present. Alright guys, starting this meeting we will once again go over Eri's training for this new year. Everyone nodded. I will continue to teach her the steps of the Rasengan, while Kushina teaches her the chakra chains, while Raiden, Genma, Iwashi are taking over her elemental training, seeing as Kushina and I have given her the base she needs to expand on those skills. The three ninjas nodded. Finally, I expect every one of you guys, myself included, to challenge her to 1 sparring session a month in order to keep her battle senses up to par. Is that understood? Yes. said everyone around the table, though Kushina was a little quieter than everyone else. This will just serve to inflate her ego even higher. Though Kushina. Minato continued. Alright now Rin, you have the latest spy reports correct? She nodded. Great, let's hear it. Stated Minato with great enthusiasm. Rin cleared her throat and started. As it would seem this last year has been quite busy in activity. The Sand and Rock nations have called for a cage summit in order to finish the Fertile Crescent dispute. Everyone widened their eyes in shock, for cage summits were quite rare and usually led to a war one way or another. Everyone but the Hidden Cloud and Water villages have agreed to the summit, which is being held in the Hot Spring Nation in a month's time, but procrastination from both sides seems to keep pushing the summit back. While the other ninjas looked confused, Minato and Kushin nodded in understanding. This makes sense to them, as it meant that both sides are trying to gain a leverage both politically and militarily before the summit in order to get the majority vote on who gains control of what land. The Hidden Cloud and the city-state of Kyuubi have entered into a military agreement which sees Cloud ninjas overseeing the training of current and future Kyuubi nins, which also allowing the Hidden Lighting Nation to store a small fleet in their major harbor. The Lightning Fleet having a base that far south. That is an aggressive move by Kumo. Was the thought around the table. Konoha has also stepped up their search and destroy missions in the Rice Nation, but also have started similar joint operations with Forest Anbu in the river and Waterfall nations. This matter will also be a topic of discussion in the summit. What is that old man thinking, stepping up an already controversial offensive, or perhaps it isn't the old man's doing. Danzo, you son of a bitch. Thought Minato as he was going through the possibilities of why the third Hokage would do such a thing. Finally, there are whispers of a powerful criminal organization that are acting as sell swords to many minor conflict zones around the elemental nations. They are rumored to be coming from the Hidden Rain village, although those are just rumors. We won't need to worry about them for now, but keep an eye out for them. We don't need them getting out of hand, said Kushina, as she didn't like the idea of a massive criminal organization running around in these dangerous times. Rin nodded and took note of Lady Kushina's order. Seeing that no one had any questions or concerns, Minato called the meeting over and decided to call it a night. Walking back with Kushina, they talked about the meeting, life, and their daughter's progress. When Kushina brought up Naruto. When we get back I think we should add Naruto's name to the memorial stone, said Kushina as they walked back in the night, the only sound being the pattering of their sandals hitting the dirt path. But what if the civilians get upset about it? They were not big fans of Naruto if the reports had anything to say about it, said Minato in a somewhat casual tone. Kushina was not having it, however, and turned to him angrily. So we just forget about him? We just say, oh sorry son, since we made you a Jinchuriki and we have a new child, we are just going to forget about you like nothing ever happened. Kushina was opening sobbing at this point, not believing that Minato could be so dismissive of Naruto like that. Kushina, it's not like that and you know it. Do you know how hard it was to leave him there? Minato turned and stopped Kushina by grabbing her by the shoulders. When I accepted the title of Hokage I had to put the village first above all else. When I faked our death, that was me failing my job as Hokage and putting my family first. Looking deep into her eyes he saw only pain. Sighing, he calmed down and let go of her before saying, Ma, maybe we can make a private shrine to him in the compound so that those that truly know his sacrifice can honor him properly and not have the villagers tear it down the second it is completed. Kushina looked into her husband's eyes for any signs of betrayal. After finding none she conceded and hugged him tightly. Thank you, that's all I want. Minato sighed and returned the hug. Maybe you didn't forget him after all, thought Kushina as they continued to walk in the night towards the compound. This was going to be another busy year. Groaning as the first rays of light hit his eyes, Naruto got up and rubbed his eyes. He took a second to look at his surroundings. It was a decent-sized bedroom with a private bathroom, closet, and dresser. While he knew where he was, he didn't take any time to examine the room itself. The light-colored wood and light lavender paint on the walls gave an extra reflection to the morning sunlight that was coming into the room via a medium-sized window with a beautiful view was a trashy alleyway. Still better than that dump in the leaf, thought Naruto. Getting changed into his regular outfit, Naruto began unpacking his belonging that was not shinobi related, namely his toothbrush, toothpaste, extra outfits etc. into their correct places. Looking at the clock on the wall, which was the only object on the walls, Naruto saw it was about time for B to take him to train. As if on cue, B kicked down the door and got a yelp out of Naruto in response. Naruto mentally screamed, I really need to put a seal on that damn door. Yo, are you ready for training? B paused and mumbled a curse before retrying a rhyme, which got a deadpan out of Naruto. Yo, you better hold on to your crouch, cause your training is getting taken up a notch. Yeah, yelled B as he flashed his pose with his hand in the air. That's a fresh rhyme. Only the best ones come with time, said B as he jotted these new rhymes into his little notebook. Enough B, can we please get on with training already, said Naruto in his emotionless tone to show that he was dead serious. Sure thing. Follow me. B then led Naruto through the apartment. Not seeing his forced roommate Naruto decided to voice his confusion. "Where is that evil cat lady?" Snickering at Naruto's comment, seeing as he knew Naruto had no anger towards the two-tails Jinchuriki, he simply replied. "Is at the academy to get schooled and getting schooled, dog." Not wanting to engage B in a rapping argument before he gets to his new training, Naruto opted to nod his head and keep moving. Moving between the traffic of people trying to get to their jobs and whatnot, the duo walked up one of the many staircases that connected tiers 2 and 3, going higher and higher. Eventually wooden structures were replaced with rooms and buildings carved out of the mountain around them. The traffic got lighter and lighter the deeper they got into the third tier of the city. Eventually, after about 45 minutes of walking and memorizing the path they took to get here, Naruto and B stood in front of a rather plain building. Looking like an enlarged basic storefront, the front simply said Storm HQ. Looking rather shocked that this building would be where his life-changing training would occur in such an inconspicuous-looking building. B saw a thing look on Naruto's face and simply replied, "Hey, don't give me that look, enemy says haven't found this building so far. They think it's so obvious that they believe it to be a trap." B smiled and walked inside. Naruto following him came inside a rather normal-looking waiting room with chairs, tables, magazines, and a female ninja behind the counter looking quite bored, but she perked up when she saw B. "Greeting, Lord B," C said, standing up and going into a small bow. B simply waved her off and told her she didn't need to do that with him. "We are here to see Lord Rashi, the Raikage told me he was expecting us." The girl nodded and started flipping through her papers before frowning and looking up at B. "I am sorry, Lord B, but I do not seem to see your papers any." Her sentence was cut off by a plume of smoke appearing right next to Naruto. Naruto, being shocked by the smoke, jumped back and got into a defensive stance, ready to engage an enemy if needed. As the smoke dissipated, it revealed an old man who looked about the same age as the third Hokage, but somehow more fragile. He had a long gray hair, bushy mustache and beard. He had white featureless eyes with dark rims underneath and thick eyebrows. Due to his old age, Naruto also noted that because of his age, he had visible cheekbones and wrinkles. He was wearing a white bandana-styled forehead protector and a standard black jumpsuit. However, unlike most ninjas he has seen in the village so far, Rashi was in Kumo's Anbu attire. Unlike most other Anbu, Naruto has seen Kumo Anbu have black pants custom to the necessities Anbu will need access to while in the field. They also appeared to have metal plates located in the front of the thigh and lower leg for increased protection without being too bulky. The thin white flak jacket was accompanied with a white chest plate that would protect its wearer from basic damage. He was also wearing a cream-colored light-hooded coat with elegant silver designs embroidered all over the coat. Over all of the outfit that tied together using a single string at his mid-chest. Naruto thought the outfit was actually kind of badass. Then Rashi spoke. "Do not worry about the paperwork, Kamiri, I was indeed expecting them." He took a look at Naruto to get a better look at his future student, however Naruto was freaked out about his pupil-less eyes. After a long pause he simply stated, "You look semi-competent. Let's get started." And before anyone could respond, Rashi closed the gap between him and Naruto, put his hand on his head, and the two disappeared in a cloud of smoke. See that he completed his only task for the morning. B glanced over at the only other person in the room, flexed his muscles, and said, "Hey sexy lady, how's about you me make a baby?" Despite being the eight-tails Jinchuriki, he could not avoid the slap that sent him flying out of the structure, past the road and over the cliff, falling down over 100 feet down to the second tier of the village. Groaning as his body ached in pain, he rapped, "Damn, good thing I didn't take a bet, why are the women so hard to get?" Before getting up and heading to his mountain training grounds just outside of the village. Meanwhile, deep inside Storm Training Facility, Naruto and Rashi reappeared in a poof of smoke in a large dark windowless room that was large enough to train around 4 teams of 3 with room to spare. There were several racks of weapons and other equipment scattered around the edge of the room. The room was moderately lit with several large lights coming down from the ceiling, but were high enough that it wouldn't interfere with training. The thing that caught Naruto's attention the most, however, were the two figures in standard tuning attire standing in the middle of the room, sitting down and idly taking to one another. While they were both about a head taller than Naruto, he could tell they were not that much older than him, maybe 2 or 3 years at the most. He was broken from his thoughts when Rashi called the two boys over. "See, Derry, come here." Both boys, seeing their sensei has returned, started to make their way over towards the old man. "Who the hell is this? A new student? Why didn't Rashi sensei tell us about this?" thought C and Derry. When both students made their way over to the old man and Naruto, Rashi put his hand towards the two boys. "Naruto, these will be your training mates." See, he gestured towards a blonde with hair very similar to Naruto, if not a little bit longer and flatter. With brown eyes and no readable expression, Rashi gestured over to the final boy. "And this is Derry." Derry, unlike the other boy Derry, had light brown skin and had whitish spiky hair that was so short one could say it was more fluffy than anything else. He too, like the other boy, had brown eyes and an unreadable expression. Now that introductions have been made, I will give you guys a simple bell test, but first I will give you a few minutes to talk amongst yourselves in order to understand each other better. And with that Rashi vanished once again into a puff of smoke. The three boys sat in silence for what seemed like hours, but was only a minute at most. The silence being unbearable for all three boys was visible on Naruto and C's faces, while Derry kept the same layer-back expression. The silence was broken when C piped up, "Alright, since we are going up against Sensei, we should probably know each other's skill sets. Well, Derry and I already know ours, we need to inform you of our skills, and vice versa, so that we have the highest chance of success." Derry nodded his head in agreement and put his own thoughts into the mix. "I agree, and while after the academy teams do a full introduction, we are storm trainees, and knowing our favorite foods will not save us in battle, but knowing our strengths and weaknesses will." Though they both made a valid were shocked when Naruto looked at them suspiciously. Taking a few moments to respond, Naruto simply said, "You guys go first." Both boys, sighing at seeing Naruto being more difficult and defensive about giving out his own skills, decided to go along with his attitude in hopes of being able to work with him through this exercise. Derry was the first to go. "My main strength is short to mid-range ninjutsu, with my elemental affinity being lightning. However, I have access to black lightning and thus can make my attacks even more powerful. I can use Kenjutsu well enough to use it as my second line of attack or defense, and I know a handful of jutsu, both elemental and normal chakra based." As Derry finished the rundown of his abilities, C started his introduction. "My specialty is long-range support. I have an abnormally powerful sensor ability that allows me to pick out specific people from even a large village. I have the ability to utilize the yin release, and I am also well versed in medical ninjutsu, allowed me to heal teammate at a respectable pace. My elemental affinity is fire, and I know a small handful of long-range fire jutsu in order to help pick off enemies. I also know the basics of Kenjutsu in order to protect myself from a close-ranged attack." Seeing that the other two were done with their skill breakdown, he noted offhandedly how their combat styles and strengths help the others' weaknesses. "Well, I guess this is it, no harm from holding some stuff back, yay," thought Naruto to himself. "I am skilled in mid and long-range ninjutsu, my affinity being wind, basic sealing, and I am also skilled in taijutsu to make up for a lack of short-range jutsu," said Naruto. The two boys nodded at the conclusion of his skill set breakdown. Naruto internally smirked, knowing that he kept the bulk of his skills hidden, which could only benefit him in the future. Before anything else could be said, Rashi reappeared and immediately got down to business. "Alright, boys, now that you have a better understanding of one another, it is time for the bell test. The purpose of the test is to grab these two sets of bells from me." Rashi then flashed 3 pairs of bells that jangled together as he presented them. "That's it," said Naruto as he looked confused at the supposedly easy task presented to him. This should be easy. He didn't see Derry or C's uneasy glances as they have tried and failed this test several times in the past. It was going to be anything but easy. "But we shall see," said Rashi as he put the bells on his pouch at his hip. "Begin." Derry and C darted off to the left side of the room to plan and course of attack. Naruto glanced back at them to see Derry waving Naruto over to come join in the planning. Naruto scoffed at them and then charged the still Rashi. Using a signless clone jutsu in order to confuse his enemy, the several copies of the Naruto came in at once. However, as they got closer, Rashi could tell which were clones and which one was the original. Ignoring all of the others, Rashi backpedaled to avoid a barrage of punches and well-located kicked from Naruto. Then Naruto, using his advanced speed from months of body conditioning, appeared behind Rashi, ready to deliver a roundhouse kick to the old man's head. However, much to Naruto's surprise, the old man managed to grab his leg by the ankle and hold him in place. A small shock wave emanated from the grip and kicked up dust on the ground, showing everyone just how much power was behind Naruto's kick. Damn, one kick like that could take someone out in a single blow, though C, as he took a second from planning to watch the battle in front of him, or rather a game of cat and mouse, as it was Naruto unleashing a barrage of taijutsu, while Rashi skillfully dodged almost everything Naruto threw at him, and everything Rashi couldn't dodge he blocked. Barry was racking his brain having a plan, but not having the resources to enact it. Damn, this plan could surely work, but I alone cannot distract him long enough for C to do his part in the plan. Derry looked over at Naruto and knew that if he could get the blonde to work with them, then victory could be possible, but as of right now he wasn't much help just attacking on his own. Deciding to take the offensive, Rashi disappeared from Naruto's frame of view, only to quickly reappear directly behind him, bashing his elbow into his upper back. Naruto only being able to widen his eyes in response before crashing and making an indent in the floor. Groggy and slow to stand up, Naruto glared his eyes at the old man, who had yet to take a formal fighting stance, instead opting to stand up straight with his hand at his sides. This only served to infuriate Naruto, and he dropped back into a taijutsu stance and tried again. With a flurry of punches and kicks, Naruto mercilessly attacked Rashi, but the old man wasn't the leader of Kumo's most elite storm units for no reason, and his defenses remained unbroken. However, Naruto's attack was stopped by a simple open-hand palm strike that sent Naruto tumbling back several yards. Recovering himself quite nicely, Naruto again charged into his new sensei, who had instantly gained the respect of Kurama. This man is strong. He has many flaws such as being old and a mere human, but he can be quite a good teach for Naruto. With that, Kurama went back to sleep, the sounds of Naruto getting his ass beat music to his ears. After a new set of punches and kicked, Rashi delivered another open palm strike to Naruto's chest, pushing and tumbling him with so much force that he skidded past both C and Derry, who were now running towards Rashi and trying to enact their plan despite not having enough support. Naruto only stopped tumbling because the wall on the other side of the wall painfully stopped him. Derry and C started the first stage of the very simply elegant plan. Derry would engage Rashi in mid-range combat. Meanwhile, C was positioning himself and was reading up his only powerful Yin release jutsu, which would be used to blind Rashi and allow Derry to grab the bells. That was the plan anyway. From the very start of the plan, things did not seem to go well. Derry was quickly losing ground to Rashi's effortless counterattacks. Rashi was right on top of Derry when he felt the surge of chakra coming from C as he charged up his just. Turning around, Rashi moved to attack C while he was defenseless, much to Derry's horror. However, before anyone could react, a large and powerful bolt of lightning struck where Rashi was and also caught Derry in the blast. "AHH!" screamed Derry as he had taken quite a bit of damage from that attack. The blast landed him far enough away from Rashi that C could cancel his attack and jumped over to where his comrade laid. C, inspecting the damage, noted that because of his power lightning affinity, the damage wasn't nearly as bad. Light to moderate burns on the upper body and slight nervous system damage. "I can still fix this in a couple of minutes," thought C. He looked over at Naruto with a light glare. He didn't say anything about lightning jutsu. Naruto slightly cursed as he saw he had hit one of the other boys as well as Rashi with that attack, but oh well, I have to defeat this man, thought Naruto. Now I just need to grab the bells off of high. Naruto paused, seeing that Rashi was nowhere left to be seen, leaving only a small charred crater instead. He substituted. Though Naruto, his ninja sense told him something was coming behind him and used a powerful roundhouse kick to block an oncoming punch from Rashi. Using the momentum from the first kick, Naruto followed through with a second kick, only to be punched in the gut and sent flying 10 or so yards. Getting up on shaky legs, Naruto unsealed the Sutmifangu from a storage seal tattooed on the back of his right hand, though Rashi didn't seem to take much notice to it, seeing as it didn't have a blade. Charging the blade up with a little bit of charka and seeing the outline of the air-based katana blade form, Naruto charged Rashi with renewed vigor. Carelessly dodging the swipes from due to both Naruto not having a proper kinjutsu form and not noticing the danger he was in. Until Rashi flew through hand signs quicker than Naruto could even dream of and said a wind jutsu he hadn't heard of before, and before he knew it, he was flung into the up and over Rashi. Doing a backflip maneuver, Naruto took one last swipe at Rashi. This time, however, the blade connected. As Naruto made a soft landing on his feet near Derry and C. How did he do this? Thought Rashi to himself. A thin red line went diagonal across a few inches of his face, a small trail of blood running down from the wound. That was when he turned around and truly looked at the hilt that he was holding. His eyes momentarily widened in shock before going back to his normal old aloof expression. He holds the Sutmifangu. How on earth did he find it? And where did I even find this kid, thought Rashi to himself. This just got a whole lot more interesting. Looking over at C finishing up healing Derry, Naruto clearly had regret in his eyes. "I am sorry for getting you hurt in that attack." Derry managed to get up and C did as well, but C still had that light glare in his eyes. Dusting off his uniform, Derry gave him a light nod. "Don't worry about it, if anything it makes things less dull. You have a lot to explain once we are done with this test, but for now you can pay me back by helping up with this plan to get the bells." Naruto nodded and Dory proceeded to give Naruto a rundown of the plan they tried earlier. That they are finally working together, this will make things even more interesting, thought Rashi. He took note that both Derry and Naruto were charging him while C got in position behind him, powering up his jutsu. It will be interesting to see what they have planning. This is the first time they have had a powerful enough third member for one of their plans. Seeing Naruto still using the Sutmifangu, Rashi took out a medium-length katana of his own and countercharged the two boys. Using basic taijutsu to keep Derry at bay while using his blade to keep Naruto back was working out for Rashi, however he felt C charging up that jutsu and from the concentration of chakra in his hands he was almost done. Having ducked under a slash from Naruto, Rashi was at a slight disadvantage when C yelled, "Naruto, Derry now." Both boys jumped over Rashi so that the boys' backs were facing C. Having been in a crouched position from the horizontal swipe from Naruto, he wasn't in a position to prevent them from moving. Getting up and turning to face the three boys, he quickly regretted it as a giant source of light emanated from C's hands. So that was what he was using the yin release for. Thought Rashi. He took a step back and covered his eyes as it hurt more than staring into the sun. Feeling Naruto charging him, he narrowly dodged another horizontal strike, this time striking him around waist level. The slash didn't miss entirely however, as a large gash was now in his coat. Why did he strike there? I know he is inexperienced in formal kinjutsu, but everyone knows the waist is one of the worst places to strike someone. Thought Rashi to himself. He didn't even go with a full extension, he only did enough to cut through my coat and my poo the bells. Thought Rashi to himself. He reached at his hips to see if the bells were still there, and much to his dismay they were missing. The light died out and he turned to see the three boys smiling widely as they held the bells in their hands. These boys are something else, you three will be the greatest extension of Kumo's power. Walking up to the three boys, Rashi looked at them and smiled lightly. Well, congratulations are in order, I guess you three did halfway decent. I suppose here are 3 scrolls that hold your storm gear, including a trainee mask. Come wearing these tomorrow and we will get your actual training started. The 3 boys uncharacteristically cheered out and Rashi interrupted them long enough to get them to all touch index fingers. Rashi added his and with a poof they all reappeared in the lobby that Naruto was dropped off at. Everything looked the same except for the large gaping hole leading to the outside. What happened here, Kamiri? Without missing a beat and without looking up she casually replied. Lord B asked me out on a date. That got a deadpan out of Naruto and Rashi. Of course, he was probably started hitting on her as we left. Thought Rashi. Rashi let the boys go for the day and disappeared in a poof of smoke, leaving the 3 boys to their own devices. Stepping outside, the 3 boys looked at each other. Naruto again looking at Derry and apologizing again for the jutsu. It is no worries Naruto as long as it doesn't happen again. Derry's eyes went into an uncharacteristic glare to prove his point before saying, why don't we go get dinner tonight at Fugikaki's? We can talk about our skills again and also do a proper introduction. C and Naruto nodded in agreement at this. Naruto, however, looked sheepish before replying, how do I get there? This is only my first full day in Kumo. Wait, he only just got here and is already in the storm program. Thought C and Derry. This put Naruto into a new light as it clearly showed the higher-ups or even Reikage himself had a lot of trust and faith in this boy that was only 2 years younger than them. Snapping out of his thoughts first, C responded. Well, it's right off of the main road between the first and second tiers, a block or so down from the bathhouses. Naruto nodded as B showed him where that was earlier when they walked through parts of the village. Alright. Sounds good. Should we meet up there say around 6? Said Naruto. Derry and C nodded and said their goodbyes. Naruto ran all the way back to Yujito's apartment, just can't get to calling it home yet. Thought Naruto. Instead of going through the front door he went through his bedroom window just so that he could avoid the cat-like ninja in the event she was home. After taking a nice long shower to ease his sore muscles, Naruto looked up and out of the window to see that night had taken over and it was soon time to go eat dinner with new comrades. Comrades, that is such a weird thought, I never would have figured I would have comrades. Said Naruto to himself. Putting on the last pieces of clothing and keeping his scroll of storm gear in his pocket, Naruto headed out into the busy street towards the restaurant. With Yujito several hours earlier, Yujito was walking out of the academy, dumbfounded, the sun was high in the air, indicating it was early afternoon. Yujito had just made friends. This was really weird as she never in her 12 years of life had never had friends in the academy. She had B, the Reikage, and few older classmen that had graduated a few years ago, but she hadn't heard from them in quite some time. When she got back into the academy earlier that morning, several students in her class that she never really talked to came up and asked where she had been. After explaining that she went on a training trip, the 3 kids were curious to say the least. After introducing themselves as Amoy, Karui, and Samui, they started talking about training, jutsu, and the such. It was quite the relief to Yujito as she feared that they would want to gossip about boys, makeup and that kind of thing. After spending the entire time of lunch together, Samui had suggested that they go eat dinner together to celebrate the creation of a new friendship and the start of their final year in the academy. After a few minutes of debating where to eat, they settled on Fugikaki's at around 6:30 later that night. Well, Yujito was mildly worried about this restaurant as she specifically avoided it as they did not treat her well at all, but she agreed nonetheless. Splitting up to go get changed into civilian clothing, Yujito was walking out of the academy dumbfounded at this sudden development. Did that really just happen or am I dreaming? She walked past B in a daze, not hearing the massive barrage of rapt questions being fired at her. Yep, yay, no, not today, maybe tomorrow. Said Yujito as she walked past the confused B. After snapping out of her daze and realizing she in fact did have plans with actual friends tonight, she sped along the rooftops to her apartment. After taking a quick shower and realizing the blonde idiot was not home from his training, yet she frowned. That idiot probably got lost trying to get back. Oh well, that's not my problem, she said to herself, failing to hear the shower going off in the guest bathroom. Putting on a loose purple t-shirt and black pants, she looked at the clock and thought that there was no harm in going a little early. Leaving in a rush, she was so happy she had already forgotten all of the glares and wetness she would receive. Arriving just a few minutes early, Yujito approaches the host stand. "Excuse me, sir, I would like a table for 4 please," said Yujito in an uncharacteristically polite voice, hoping that the man will not be rude to her because of her burden. That was not to be, however. Crouching down and not seeing who was talking, the host responded. "Why certainly ma'am, let me get a nod." As he stood up, he saw who it was, that girl. Why couldn't she just leave here and never come back? Everyone would be a lot happier if she did. "Sorry, but we are out of tables. Please. I have friends coming to eat with me and they would really lee." The host cut her off. As tears started build up in Yujito's eyes, threatening to burst out at any moment. "No. You need to understand that you are not welcome here, now get." He ended his sentence short when he saw his boss's son walking up with 2 other kids. "Aw Samui, how are you doing ma'am?" Instead of saying hi and walking inside to see her father who owned this restaurant, Samui glared at him. "Is there a reason why you are preventing my friend from getting a table?" Sasichi, the now identified Sasichi, widens his eyes in fear before shaking his head and "No ma'am, it was a miss." Samui wouldn't let him finish. "No. What was a misunderstanding was why my father hired you in the first place. Leave. Pack up your stuff and leave. My father will understand." Without saying a word, Sasichi left the restaurant and Samui turned to her friends with an uncharacteristically apologetic look. "Sorry about that guys, but what he was doing was unacceptable. Yujito, are you okay?" Yujito sniffled as she wiped the tears off of her face and responded with a light smile. "Yeah, I will be fine, thank you for standing up for me." Before anyone could question Yujito as to why the host treated her the way he did, Yujito's stomach rumbled. "Oh dang, looks like it's time for food." And the 4 went into the restaurant ready to eat. They sat down at a booth that allowed them a view of almost the entire dining portion of the restaurant. After getting their orders, they talked about many different topics. Samui confirmed their meals were on her as her father would give her free meals to both her and any friends that she brought. Yujito found out that Samui was actually quite an emotional person, but she did a good job of hiding it. Carrie was a calculating person despite her hot-headed personality. She also found out that Amoy had a tendency to overthink scenarios and would come up with ridiculous ideas. Towards the end of the meal, Carrie noticed 2 people eating a few booths away. "Hey guys, is that C and Derry over there?" Everyone turned around and saw that it was in fact Derry and C eating with a third person they couldn't see due to the angle of the booth they were sitting in. The 4 students knew Derry and C well as they were in their final year of the academy when Samui and them were in their second year of the academy. They were often looked up to by the younger students due to their willingness to train and tutor younger student, Samui, Amoy, Carrie, Yujito and Samui included. However, once they graduated the academy, they rose through the ranks quite fast and eventually lost contact with almost every due to their introduction into the STORM program, although no one else knew about that. Barry, seeing that they had finished both their meals and their sake, decided to call them over and catch up on lost time. When the 2 boys made their way over to their booth, the third party member was revealed to be Naruto. While Yujito shot him a dirty look and Naruto shot her one back, the other 3 kids did not know who he was. When asked about it, Derry simply replied, "He is our new teammate." After spending a few minutes catching up, both tables decided it was time to leave. Yujito's group decided to split up and walk home, while Naruto's group took to the rooftops before splitting up. Naruto was lost in thought and almost at the apartment before he realized that he had left his wallet at the restaurant. After going all of the way back and getting his wallet from the restaurant, Naruto once again took to the rooftops, trying to get back to the apartment, excited at the prospect of training to become an Anbu. He was broken out of his thoughts as he saw a group of civilians huddled around a dead-end alleyway. Curiosity getting the best of him, he decided to investigate. Getting a closer look, he was shocked to find a wounded Yujito getting attacked by the civilians. Bleeding profusely from her shoulder, she dodged attack after attack from the mostly drunken civilians. Why on earth isn't she defending herself? Thought Naruto to himself. Then he saw it as though it were a ghost from a time long since past. Standing next to the injured Yujito was the visage of a younger yet equally battered Naruto in a desperate fighting stance, but not going all out. Then he heard those words he had said so long ago. "Do what you will with me tonight, but I will become the Hokage and earn your respect." Getting a tear forming in his eye, he took out the scroll that contained his storm trainee gear. While he only had enough time to put on the mask and the solid cream white coat, Naruto knew that it would be enough. Now looking like a storm agent, Naruto jumped down just in time to prevent the civilians from finishing off Yujito. Landing on the hard ground with a solid thud, Naruto stood up at full height. That alone caused most of the drunk villagers to take a step back, but one stood ready to attack again. Yujito looked at her defender in a slight sense of awe. "No one has stood up for me until today." Tears were openly falling from her eyes. "Ninja sir, can you please get out of my way so that I can kill the demon bitch?" said the lone gutsy villager. This caused a usually reserved Naruto to slowly release his massive amount of killer intent. This caused many of the villagers to faint out of fear and the gutsy villager to drop to a knee. Naruto walked up to him and without remorse, slit his throat with a kunai. Attacking a fellow citizen of Kumo is illegal, and since it is a child in question is punishable by death. The remaining villagers got the message and quickly fled, leaving everyone who fainted behind. Turning around he saw the badly wounded Yujiro and picked her up bridal style. Hopping on the rooftops to the closest hospital that knew about Yujiro finally spoke up. "Thank you for saving me, ninja sir, not many people have done that before." Naruto not responding prompted Yujiro to continue. "Why did you save me?" Naruto looked down. Her normally vibrant blonde hair was dirty, her clothing was a mess and torn up, and her cheeks were stained with both blood and tear streaks. After waiting a few minutes Naruto responded. "Because there was a time I was treated just like you." Yujiro's eyes widened in shock before she promptly fainted due to blood loss. And like that Naruto's silhouette flush against the full moon delivered Yujiro to the hospital. After making sure that Yujiro was going to get treated fairly by the doctors, he immediately went to the Raikage's office to inform him of what had happened. Raikage's office 45 minutes later, after getting an in-depth report of what happened to Yujiro, could only frown. "Those idiot villagers, if I wasn't Raikage I'd kill them, but it looks like Naruto did it for me." Naruto stood in place. His storm attire still being worn. "Naruto, you're being assigned your first mission when you are not training with your team. Your active mission is to act as a guardian for Yujiro Nai, is that understood?" "Yes sir." Naruto saluted. While he still didn't like her personality, he did now see her in a new light, the same one he was in so many years ago. "But now get out of here. From what I understand your first training session is tomorrow." A chuckled. "Trust me, you're going to need the rest." Naruto was walking out but stopped when A said one more thing. "Oh, and Naruto, thank you." Naruto nodded his head and walked out of the office. Meanwhile in Yuzu, the moon was as full as it was the night before, convincing Minato to go take a walk of his own by himself. The wind was picking up in the forest, causing Minato's signature high-collared coat to flutter in the wind. Thinking about the massive amount of progress his daughter has made caused him to smile. He was sure without a doubt that she was the chosen child. There was no doubt because, well, there was only one child left that could be the chosen child. Going down that thought made him think about his dead son Naruto. He had great plans for him. He was going to train him after he graduated from the academy, teach him his signature jutsus, and if Eri wasn't the chosen child and Naruto was, then he would have made him train under Jiraiya. However, none of that was to be. However, he had to make a choice to save his family, and that choice had an effect on his family, just like if he had chosen to stay in Konoha. He knew that if he had stayed with his family after the Kyuubi attacked, then his enemies would have killed them all in retaliation for his actions in the last Great War. At least if he left and faked his death, then no one would suspect his child's existence. His thoughts also drifted to Kakashi. "He just wasn't mentally stable enough to come with us," thought Minato to himself. He figured that if Kakashi stayed in Konoha, then being so close to the Will of Fire would help him recover. His reports coming in from the Hidden Leaf have proved this theory true, as he is somewhat close with Guy, as an eternal rival as Guy calls it. Minato chuckled lightly before frowning once again. "I have made many tough choices in my life, leaving Naruto and Kakashi behind were just the most recent of them." After walking another 15 minutes in silence, Minato ended his thought process with "I can only hope Kakashi can forgive me in this life and that Naruto can forgive me in the next life." Kumo Academy 3 months later, Vegito sighed as she stared outside of the window. She never did know why she was being forced to attend the academy until recently. To make friends and to get additional knowledge of the shinobi lifestyle. The Raikage told her. Well, she had only recently made friends in the academy who were all sitting in her row. She couldn't for the life of her get anything useful out of what was being taught at the academy, primarily because she already knew everything that was being taught. B, despite being a terrible rapper, was an excellent shinobi and a great teacher. Thinking about great shinobi made her think about the mysterious storm nin who has been watching over her. While his mask did not have any distinct features on it, she could tell it was the same one. After the first month or so, civilians have figured out that she had someone protecting her and was no longer an easy target. While she still got the glares and the unfair treatment in most stores, she was no longer being attacked, which was enough for her. After a few minutes of thinking about these shinobi, Yujiro was jarred out of her thoughts by a figure perched on an electrical pole about 100 yards from the academy. "The storm nin," thought Yujiro to herself. He was just perched up there staring directly at her, just watching, making sure that she was okay. She blushed slightly. While she wasn't a girly girl by any means, she, like many other females, dreamt of that shinobi in shining armor that would be willing to do anything to protect them from danger. "Kind of like what he is doing for me," she thought. Her blush got a little darker and more pronounced as the Nibi butted in. Yujiro, well, that storm boy is interesting. I still think that Naruto boy would be a better mate." The Nibi paused. That way I could see Kurama. She thought to herself. The sensei's voice is from South Park thought it'd be funny. Before Yujito could even respond to the idea of that stupid blonde being anything more than an annoyance to her, Yujito heard her sensei speaking to her. Yujito, are you even paying attention to what I am teaching? Mk. Basic first aid is not something to shrug off in this line of work. Mk. Say for example in a completely hypothetical situation that is not likely to happen, you are on a basic C rank mission to escort say a bridge builder Mk. To a poverty-stricken nation so that he can build a bridge to fix the nation, however the C rank turns into an A rank when several powerful missing nin are paid to kill your client Mk. So you and your team battle it out with them and you are hurt Mk. What do you do? First aid, so pay attention to the lesson. Mk. Sorry sensei said Yujito. Flustered that she had been called out in the middle of class. When her sensei turned back to the board to continue the lesson she glanced back out of the window, she noticed that the figure was now gone. With nothing left to focus on outside, Yujito went on to pay some attention to the lesson for the day. Meanwhile with Naruto hopping down into the street near the academy, Naruto cursed himself for getting sloppy. He ignored the shocked looks on some of the civilians or the sudden appearance of a storm ninja as he continued to think. Why did I let myself get sloppy enough for her to see me? His thoughts trailed off as he started patrolling around the academy on foot. He let his thoughts pause, hoping Kurama would chime in an idea that would explain his change in behavior recently, however the nine-tailed fox was silent. While Naruto could explain his protective nature over Yujito with his desire to protect a fellow Jinchuriki from the same hatred that he endured back in Konoha, he could not explain the slight stirring in his chest when he saw her. Lust, he thought to himself. While he was young, Kurama's presence in his body meant that Naruto was going through his puberty a little quicker than his peers. For her age Yujito was quite the looker and would only go on to become more and more beautiful with maturity, however for Naruto that seemed to be her only positive feature. In his eyes she was hot-headed, bratty, and self-centered. During his 2-month protection mission he noticed that Yujito was starting to care more for others as she hung out with her friend group, but even they could not get her to stop being hot-headed or bratty. She still treated him like crap when he did see her in the apartment, although it was starting to die down a little bit as B kicked up her training. Shaking his thoughts from Yujito, his mind starting going towards his team and how much they have grown since their bell test. While Naruto, C and Derry became an official storm team last week, they had been on the official rotation almost since the start of their training. This was done by the Raikage in anticipation of their passing on to an official storm team so that they could be put out onto an assignment almost immediately. Teams were put into a 3-part rotation. Rotation 1 is basically time off. It gives storm nin spending time with loved ones, train and hone their skills in a safe environment, and to experience all that the village that they fight to protect has to offer. In the event that something major happened and the other rotations needed assistance, then these nin were the first ones called up. Rotation 2 was the domestic deployment for storm nin. Every team on this rotation were deployed to major military, industrial, or residential areas of the Lightning Nation. Some locations included but were not limited to were the nation's capital city Jesu, Dargai, Naju, Solgol Fortress, and Heron Port. While they had assigned duties during this rotation, there was still ample amounts of time for storm ninjas to train and hone new skills in the field. Storm nin in rotation 2 were also required to do consistent border patrol, high-valued persons, HVP, escort. The final and most dangerous, depending on the political climate of all of the rotations, was rotation 3. This rotation was international deployment. This consisted of espionage on foreign nations, covertly interfering with missions from other nations, and protection of allied nations. It was the most dangerous because in the event that a storm nin is discovered in the act of espionage, then one of two things must happen by any means. Either the witness is eliminated or the evidence and completely erase the storm nin included. Each storm nin knows that death is a major possibility in their line of work. In order to prevent their village from entering a war prematurely, the storm ninjas are trained and willing to activate a basic kill seal that is located on their person that will not only kill the user but also destroy their body on the molecular level, leaving no proof that it was a storm nin that was spying. Well, each rotation lasted 4 months, so that way each team does one of these rotations once a year. However, it was not uncommon for storm nin to be taken off of the rotation following a major fight, injury, or sickness. Thankfully for the members of the Storm program, Rotation 3 has been mostly the protection of international assets instead of spying lately. This meant that deaths while in this rotation were minimal. While Naruto and his team were just put into the rotation system and were assigned to Rotation 1, they had entered the rotation a measly 2 weeks before the rotation shifted. Naruto would not know where he would be deployed to until the night before he left. "I'm excited to put my team to the test against actual threats," thought Naruto to himself. Yes, I too am anticipating seeing not only how creating bonds has improved your skills, but also how much that old man's teaching have had an impact on you. Just watching it is clear he is quite powerful even in his old age. said Kurama, finally speaking up. Kurama-sensei. When did you wake up? Said Naruto in his mindscape. Just now, lied Kurama. He had heard everything his host had said about the two-tailed host, but chose to not respond, fearing that even he, a body of hatred, demonic chakra, and hundreds of years worth of experience, did not know anything about females and what went on in their minds. Well, sensei, what do you think of our team from your view? Asked Naruto. Well, since the other two humans decided to make you the team's leader, I am very confident in the team's tactical skill, since I taught you advanced combat maneuvers, and that man taught you espionage and small team management. Replied Kurama. I know that, but what about skills individually and in conjunction with the other two members? Naruto asked. A little annoyed that he had to restate his question. Brushing off his student's clearly disrespectful attitude, Kurama responded. Well, Darui's usage of a mixture of mid and close-range lightning jutsu is valuable to the team, and his ability in that field can only be compared to yours, that leader of yours you call the Raikage, and maybe even the man who trapped me in here. Started Kurama, but that last man mentioned was to a whisper so that Naruto could not hear. That was for naught, however, as Naruto did in fact hear that last bit, but chose not to bring it up, instead waiting for Kurama to continue. C is very useful in both medical and long-range suppression, allowing both you or Dari to go in for the kill, and is by that logic alone very useful for the team's dynamic. Now as for you ability to use 3 different elements effectively in many different ranges, the basics of seals, and with that sword of yours, you are a clear presence on the battlefield, especially since you figured out how the scrolls worked. Flashback 1.5 months earlier, after a rather intense training session with his team and Rashi-sensei, Naruto sat on his bed sighing. His latest task was researching various kinjutsu styles that could complement his sword's various abilities. After scouring the shinobi library and testing out all of the different that Kumo had to offer, they could not find a style that Naruto or Rashi felt would work with the sword. Thankfully for Naruto, Rashi was one of the few people in the elemental nations that knew of the sword and its potential. He had stated that there was style developed just for each of the 3 swords and that they would have to find it. After interjecting that Naruto in fact did have the scrolls that came with the sword but were blank, Rashi paused in thought. After a moment of thinking, he told Naruto to try reading them again. Now he was back in his room. Laying down on his bed, he could hear Yujito fixing up some dinner after just getting back from the academy. After fetching the smaller of the 2 scrolls, he unraveled the scroll, expecting the same blank paper to greet him. His eyes widened as he saw text in place of the emptiness that had once been there. Hello warrior, if you are reading this, then you have began the first step to truly learning how to use this weapon. You see, when I created the 3 swords, I made each of them bound and react to a specific emotion using seals and rituals to the gods. With the High no Hertsu being bound to anger and frustration, the Chikuk to determination. And the Sutmufangu is bound to both willpower and love. This blade, the Sutmufangu, I made special as it is for my home nation. You see, I had hoped that by creating this weapons it would put everyone on an even playing field, and the people of this war-stricken land would see the futility of warfare. Of course, as I am writing this, I have seen the error of my narrow-minded vision. Enough about me. You are probably wanting to know more about the scroll you are reading. If you are reading this scroll, then the advanced seals I put on that detect yin and yang chakra activated, allowing you to read a portion of the scroll's contents. To simplify this, you have enough of the emotion that is bonded with the sword to unlock the entirety of the basic level content of the scroll, including the base of the sword style, Hurricane FK, Storm Hurricane. The more of the emotion you have, and the more the seals deem you worth, the more the scroll will reveal. To scroll is separated into 4 levels. Basic, Intermediate, Advanced, and Master. Naruto read to himself out loud. Naruto stopped reading in favor of looking at the different techniques and information. True to the scroll's words, only the basic section of the scroll had any text on it. Wasting no time, Naruto shot out of his room. He was so excited that he blew right past a now upset Yujito, ignoring the profanity that followed as rushed exist. Naruto headed straight for the nearby training grounds and didn't leave for the next 12 hours. Training himself into the ground. Wow, I knew bonds would make me stronger, but this is ridiculous. Naruto thought to himself as he was finishing up his training and sleep was finally taking over him. Flashback end. Kurama chuckled when he remembered how happy the kid was to finally make noticeable progress in using the sword. Sure, Naruto could use it to a very basic degree, but not without it backfiring on him in some way, shape or form. The fox knew that if he had $1 for each time he almost lost a limb to that sword, he'd be rich. Naruto was also lost in his own thoughts. Well, I guess we will see when we get deployed. Naruto walked off into the crowded street surrounding the academy, making sure that Yujito stayed out of trouble. Meanwhile, in Raikage's office, A was looking over the newest reports he had received from the Storm Nin deployed further south on the coast of the Kizoko Sea. So Kyuubi is looking to us for diplomatic annexation. He thought to himself. He was surrounded by not only Rashi, but also several other trusted advisors, Fuzuki and Himari. both around the same age as Rashi, but unlike Rashi they were long past their prime and could no longer perform the duties of a shinobi. A looked at a map that was provided that explained the situation further. Konoha, Hidden Forest, and Hidden Waterfall villages are putting massive amounts of military and diplomatic pressure on Rikubi and its limited shinobi forces to open their borders to unrestricted searches across its lands, effectively putting Rikubi under Konoha's control. Yuzuki stepped forward to explain. With Rikubi being one of the only ports with active trade with the rice country Konoha and its allies believe it to actually be a stronghold of Orochimaru, or at least a major supply point for him. A nodded in understand. However, Storm have concluded that Orochimaru has little to no presence in the city and it is an unjustified and aggressive attack on Konoha's part. Concluded Rashi. Yuzuki, Himari, what is the fire country doing? It was Himari who stepped forward. Well, Raikage sir. She started. The fire daimyo is very hesitant to do anything at all, what with Konoha being the most aggressive of all of the 5 great powers at moment, while the fire country is mobilizing 2 armies of foot troops in the event of retaliation from another power its navy has yet to move. This can only mean that the navy will be dormant during the occupation or it is getting refitted. My bet is on the first option. After being in deep thought for several minutes A finally spoke up. Okay. Rashi diverts 6 teams of Storm Nin to be deployed to Rikubi for border patrol when the next rotation happens. Fuzuki gets 68 Chunin and Jounin ninjas arranged into teams of 4. Get Hada Aizo and Izumo Nobuo to head up these ninja. They will join forces with existing Rikubi Nin to create a large enough standing force to dissuade any attacks. And Himari, I need you to draft a letter to the Lightning Daimyo. Ask him for a good-sized fleet to help protect Rikubi Harbor. And ask him for a small force of samurai for a police force, but make sure he knows that the samurai are optional. Everyone nodded at their instructions and left the room to complete their task. Each person that was in that room knew that war could be coming in the near future. Raikage's office 1 week later. A was looking over his desk, which was covered in maps, documents, and scrolls containing information about various ninja within Rikubi's small ninja program. The only other person in the room was Rashi. In his hands was a scroll containing the teams that he had hand-picked to be deployed to Rikubi following the next rotation that was set to happen in only a few days. They sat in silence before A picked up 2 letters and read them both. It looks like things are going in our favor, thank the log. A started. Rikubi agreed to our terms, but they also offered to send promising cadets to Kumo every other year for them to be integrated into our own ninja program, which the condition that they serve around half-year deployed to Rikubi. Rashi burrowed his eyes in thought. While it would provide a small boost to our ninja program, it would also strengthen our relations with the locals. Some of the population are not quite happy with the idea of losing their independence, said Rashi sagely. Bane nodded his head in agreement before showing the second letter in his massive hand. The Lightning Daimyo has also agreed to our request for assistance in this matter. Not only has he given us command of a 40-ship-strong fleet and supplies for such a military venture, but he has also sent 120 samurai to act as a military police force in Rikubi so that our ninja can be focused entirely on the border. He is sending them in 2 days' time in order to avoid a massive storm that will be brewing over the Kizoko Sea in 1 week. Ta gives us enough time to get our ninja to the harbor where the fleet is based in. Reading over the note, Rashi decided to input his own thoughts. It also says here that the city-state citizens will also be give full citizenship into the Lightning Nation. That was kind of him to do so. He must believe that will help with our efforts there. Again A nodded in agreement. But enough toying around, let me see the storm teams that you will be sending off to Rikubi. Rashi handed him the list and A looked over each and every single word with a critical eye. This operation would be very delicate and he could not afford failure because the wrong storm ninja was chosen. He nodded his head approval of Rashi's choices until his eyes scanned the last team. Naruto, Uzumaki, C, and Derry, A and neither C or Derry actually have last names, so it. A looked at it for a second before looking up at Rashi. Before A could ask, however, Rashi explained his choice. I know why you are questioning my decision, but let me explain myself. Well, this operation is important, it will not be the most dangerous. At worst I would expect light skirmishing with Konoha and its allies. Furthermore, Naruto's team, while young and inexperienced, is easily one of the most balanced and successful teams to come out of our training program in decades. While Rashi was talking, A eyes bulged out of his head in shock. For Rashi to make such a bold statement and shocking to say the least. I knew they were going to be strong, but for so much progress to be made for Rashi to have that confidence impressive. Also, Naruto has been excelling in Fuinjutsu to the point where he is already making level 5 seals, and his own seals that he is creating are level 6 and 7. Also, let us not forget that you were doing similar mission before the third great shinobi warlord Raikage. Concluded Rashi. A had to admit that he had him there. He had been doing high-profile missions since he was 11 years old. Fine. They can go on the deployment, just make sure we do not lose them. They are a great asset to this village. Rashi nodded his head. Of course Lord Raikage, it's not like they will be fighting the fourth Hokage or something. Both men laughed knowing that such a thing would not happen. After a little more chit-chat Rashi left the room to go inform all of the Storm Ninja of their assignments for the upcoming rotation that would be happening in 2 days. Meanwhile in Yuzu, everyone was gathered around a large bonfire in the middle of a forest clearing near the main ruins. Drinks were being had and Eri was sitting with her parents and Rin while they laughed and talked with one another. Minato had sneezed a little while earlier and had joked that someone must be talking about him, causing everyone to Minato stood up got everyone's attention. Everyone. I just wanted to say thank you for sticking with me and my family during these long 12 years, thank you for packing up and leaving everything behind in the name of the village, and finally thank you for helping in the training of my daughter. Eri beaming at the slight form of praise that she was receiving. Now the reason we are thanking you should be obvious by now said Kushina as she took Minato's hand and stood up. The time for training is done and we all have to return to Konoha. Well we originally planned for 3 whole years for staying and training Eri. Things in Konoha are not in a good place, so instead we need to head back and prevent the village from entering a conflict it cannot win right now. Genma decided to speak up. Lord Hokage, if I may ask, what has happened that requires such urgency? Everyone else looked up to Minato wondering the same thing with the exception of Rin, who had been the one to personally inform her sensei of these events. Minato, after taking a moment to decide what to tell them, he started. Konoha, in their attempts to weed out and weaken Orochimaru, had decided to pressure the city-state of Ryukubi into essentially being annexed in the Fire Country. Thinking it would take out a major supply route for Orochimaru, as Minato took a second to think about what else to say, each ninja around him widened their eyes in shock. Such a bold move will not be treated lightly by the other nations. Thought everyone around the fire. Konoha and its allies have been sending patrols into Ryukubi's borders and have already had light skirmishes with its ninja, but what makes the situation dire is that Ryukubi has gone to Kumo for annexation and protection, and the Raikage accepted it if the third Hokage continues to pursue his Rouge student any longer, then it could lead to war with the other nations. That is why we must return. Everyone nodded their heads in understanding, and that is when Kushina spoke up. Rin has arranged for a boat to pick us up in 4 days' time, which gives us time to pack up and train for a little bit longer. The boat will drop us off in the Tankani port in Wave Country, and from there we will make our way to Konoha. If everything works out we will be there after 5 or so days of travel. But everyone be ready, within 3 days there is a major storm that will coming through the area and we need to beat it if we want to get back on time. Everyone nodded at the slight change in plan and looked up to Minato when it looked like he was about to speak. Now enough of the heavy atmosphere, let's celebrate each other's accomplishments in the last few years. Everyone cheered and continued drinking and chatting, indicating that Minato had succeeding in improving morale among his followers. While Kushina took Eren to talk to other people, Rin had walked up to Minato. Minato-sensei, can I talk to you real quick? Minato looked a little surprised at the somewhat somber expression on his student's face given the light atmosphere, but agreed nevertheless. Sure, let's talk over here for some privacy. They walked down the forest path that led back towards the compound they were living in. So what's on your mind? I'm worried about Kakashi. He has lived the last 12 years thinking that he had killed me, and 11 years since he thought that you and Lady Kushina died. What if he doesn't accept us back? What if he hates us for abandoning him? By this point Rin was in full tears. It was clear to Minato that this had been on her mind for quite some time. Rin had a break from the crying when she felt a hand on her head. Looking up through her teary eyes she could see that Minato had something to say. Rin, I would be lying if I said Kakashi hasn't been on my mind recently. In fact, I think of him and Naruto quite often. Well, we were too late to come home to Naruto to show him love and compassion. It is not too late to the same for Kakashi. I told you I left him there to be close to the village, to the will of fire. It is what he needed in order to heal mentally and emotionally. And if I know my student, and believe me I do, he will welcome us back with open arms like nothing ever happened. He finished his little speech with a heartwarming smile that put Rin at ease. Sure, he has to welcome us back. We are his family, thought Rin to herself. She was broken from her thoughts when Minato beckoned for her to follow. Now come on, let's get back to the party. And they walked back into the clearing and joined in the festivities, everyone blissfully unaware of the hardships that laid ahead. Meanwhile in Hokage's office, while everyone else was making their plans and moving their pieces like a complex game of chess, the third Hokage was doing the same thing. After losing the son of his predecessor because of his weak-willed style of leadership, Hiruzen had changed after he found out about Naruto's fate. He had sent envoys to the Hidden Mist in hopes of bargaining for his surrogate grandson's life. He failed. He tried being there for Naruto. He failed. He tried making Naruto's life easier by passing a few laws in his favor. He failed. He tried to send a rescue party made up of Anbu to go rescue the boy. They reported that most of the prisoners had died in a massive riot including Naruto. Once again he failed. His life, despite being praised by so many as a success as the god of shinobi, he himself knew that he failed so many people, both alive and dead. It was these reason that he has tried so hard to take out the one last failure in his life, Orochimaru. While most of his failures as a shinobi and a leader have thankfully only affected one or two other people, Orochimaru was different. He was an evil, vile man that didn't mind hurting others for his own gain. While Hiruzen knew that people were being negatively affected by his choice to hunt down Orochimaru so aggressively, he knew in the long run it'd be worth it. Looking down at the maps and documents, his eyes scanned a report from Rikubi, and his eyes widened. What? Rikubi went to Kumo for annexation, and Kumo actually accepted it. Thought Hiruzen to himself. Well, this surely changes things. Said Hiruzen to one on as the office was empty. Well, the most logical thing to do is wait it out and see if they actually go through with the annexation, and if they do, then we will send some small teams in to test their defenses over the course of a couple of days to save face in the international community. With a course of action planned, Hiruzen made his way home for the night. Oh Minato, how I wish you were here. Konoha needs a true leader, not someone as weak as me. The next day, Storm HQ. Everyone was gathered in a large hall deep within the Storm HQ. Naruto, C, and Derry were all sitting together and were anxious for their assignment. All three were in standard storm attire. Black, somewhat baggy black Anbu-style pants. The pants also had metal plates located in the front of the thighs and lower leg for increased protection without being too bulky. A thin white flak jacket was accompanied with a white chest plate that would protect its wearer from basic damage. Each was also wearing a cream-colored light hooded coat that was worn open, exposing the outfit, however it was tied together at chest level with a simple string to prevent it from fluttering too much. Unlike some of the veterans of the Storm program who had been on some tough missions and killed strong opposites, Naruto and his team's coats were a basic cream color with no embroidering, whereas the veterans had elegant phrases and images embroidered within their coat in various colors to give a sense of individuality. Each face was covered by a mask that was in the form of an animal. Just like in Konoha, Naruto and his team were given birds for their mask. C had the falcon, Derry had hawk, and Naruto was given eagle. Naruto had protested a little at not being about to choose his mask as he wanted fox, but the Raikage and Rashi didn't really give a shit. They were all conversing amongst themselves before Rashi appeared on the stage and immediately got into the meeting. Alright, we are here to hand out assignments for those going to rotation 2. Teams 1 to 4 are to go to Jesu, teams 5 to 9 go to Dargai, teams 10 to 15 go to Soul Goal Fortress, teams 16 to 21 go to Heron Port. This went on for several minutes, and as Ninja filed out of the room to get ready for their journey to their post, Naruto perked up when he heard the final assignment. Finally, teams 41 to 45 and your team Naruto are to head as a group to the port city of Rikubi. It was recently annexed to our country, and Konoha has been sending small forces into its borders. When you get to the city, report to one Hada Izo and he will be your commanding officer for this rotation. Everyone nodded and filed out of the room. While Naruto and C were clearly excited for such an important deployment, Derry had other ideas. Man, why couldn't we get a more dull assignment like Jesu or Naju? At least Naju has really good hot springs from what I hear. Hearing his comrades' complaints, Naruto slapped Derry on the back, getting an angry glare in return. Aw, come on Derry, it won't be that bad. What's the worst that could happen? We fight some SS rank ninja like the 4th Hokage. The three boys laughed at such a prediction, while Kurama growled in anger at hearing the name of the blonde bastard that was responsible for trapping him. Well, it could be worse, he did give me a very powerful host and student. Thought Kurama as he drifted back off to sleep. Not knowing what was about to happen. Open ocean between Yuzu and Fire Country 3 weeks later. Ugh, hold the rope. We need to keep the mast from ripping off. Yelled one of the sailors as he and his fellow crewmen fought tooth and nail against Mother Nature. The captain of the ship and leader of the crew in question had a withered face and gray hair to match. He held on tightly to the wheel as rain pelted him and the ship like bullets, and the wind howled around them, threatening to rip the ship apart. He watched his second-in-command bark out orders to the men in order to keep the Weeping Willow afloat and towards its destination of Wave Country. It is bad enough that we were several weeks late. He subconsciously flinched at the thought of when the party that chartered his boat came aboard. To say they were pissed would be an understatement. He shook those thoughts and went about his next actions. Jin. Take control of the wheel, I need to talk with the clients about moving north to avoid the rest of the storm. Yelled out the captain. Jin merely nodded his head, then took the place of the captain, still barking out orders to the men below. Such a fine lad. He will make a nice captain one day. Once he made it below deck to the massive passenger bay, he ignored everything else around him and made his way straight towards the party's leader. The man with bright blonde hair and blue eyes. Minato, I know you wanted to make port in Wave Country, but with the worst part of the storm about to hit us, the best course of action would be to ride the current heading north. It will put us closer towards grass and rice country, but we will hopefully outrun the most dangerous part of the storm. After the captain was finished speaking, Minato just smiled. Not a real smile, but the kind of smile that reeked of disappointment or dissatisfaction. "I am sorry, Captain, but we simply cannot do that. You see, all of us are not really welcomed in that part of the world." We continued on the planned course. "It is bad enough you and your crew were almost 2 weeks late." Minato's fake smile fell and a frown took its place. The captain was flabbergasted. Who exactly are these people? Were they so disliked that they are willing to risk their lives in a storm? He looked around to see the other reaction to the information. The red-headed woman and her child seemed to be indifferent and the ninja escorting them seemed to follow the blonde's words as though it was law. Before the captain could say anything he heard shouting from the deck. "Captain, come quick." It was Jin. What could he possibly want? As the old captain made his way out of the protection of the lower decks he was once again pelted by the rain. Once he reached the helm of the ship he could see the distress of his second-in-command. "Jin. What seems to be the problem, boy?" "Sir, look," shouted Jin. He pointed towards the starboard bow off into the distance and the captain had to squint his eyes and use both hands to block out the rain. After a minute of looking he finally saw what he was supposed to see far out in the distance. "What that heck? Is that a damned island?" The captain then pulled out his map that had a cheap seal on it that prevented it from getting wet. One of the best purchases he has made. "What the hell? There shouldn't be any islands on the route, there are some to our northwest, but that would mean we are off course." He looked up from his map and saw more and more land appearing out far in the distance. Far too much land to be an island. "Wait a damn minute, that can't be." The captain continued to look down at the map and made a startling realization. "That's no island. It's the mainland." He looked up in complete shock. He tuned everything out as he saw Jin shouting something at him and then to the crew and they all scattered about in a terrified fashion, but he ignored it in favor of looking at the map. "How the hell is this possible? We aren't near wavy country." I know that he started scribbling notes about where they could possibly be on the map and after a few seconds it was narrowed down to only 2 options. "Okay, we're either near rice country or it didn't push us as far north and we are near R." He couldn't finish his thoughts as he and the entire ship were flung out of the water in a violent collision. Once he made contact with the water he could feel his body shutting down due to his old age and the shock of the cold water engulfing him. "You win," he thought. "After so many years of trying to kill me, you finally did it, Mother Nature. You win." He closed his eyes as his body sunk deeper and deeper in the darkness of the water. Unknown shore several hours later. Minato never really enjoyed the ocean as much as he should. Water. He loved it, he often fantasized about taking Naruto and Kushina to a nearby lake and just enjoying life and having a fun time. Of course that was no longer possible. Perhaps with Eri. "We can still have that fun day, we just need to get home first." He had no idea where he was. All he knew was that it was not fire country. The types of oak he was seeing did not grow that far south. Minato looked around and took in the scene. The grains of sand clung to his still wet clothing and the scattered planks of wood that had come off of the ship once it had impacted the nearby reef. The rain did not let up after the wreck and had only intensified. He looked towards where some of the survivors were. None of the crew survived and the only reason they did was because of his quick thinking and their ninja training. To say he was terrified for the first few minutes when he did not know if Eri, Rin, or Kushina survived would be a gross understatement. He saw Rin caring for Eri who had cried herself to sleep. Makes sense, she's just a child, and that was quite terrifying. They were both resting on a random crate that had also made it from the ship. That was where most of the survivors were. Just taking inventory of what and who they had lost. He was broken from his thoughts as both Kushina and Genma walked up to him. Minato chucked at the large frown on Kushina's face. "Still haven't dried off. I thought all Uzumaki loved to be around the ocean." She instantly had a fire lit in her eyes and her hair separated into 9 different tail-like strands. "You get back here and I'll show you how much the Uzumaki love water." Genma chuckled as Kushina tried her hardest to destroy the man she loved. After a few minutes later Genma had to save Minato by telling Kushina they had to plan. After walking a few steps away and Kushina went towards Eri to comfort her child as she went through the traumatic experience of surviving a shipwreck. "Lord Hokage, we lost most of our men in the wreck and storm, we only have 9 people including us, your family, and Rin." Genma had a tear in his eyes. He had grown up with most of those ninja and had bonded with them over the 12 almost 13-year-long period. He looked up as Minato put a hand on his shoulder to comfort him. "It's okay, Genma, we will get through this and they will all have their names on the memorial stone." He paused to let Genma take in that information. "Right now what is important is that you and the other protect my family while I go to the nearest town to see where the hell we are." "Yes, Lord Hokage," replied Genma as he watched Minato go through a few hand seals before applying a very powerful hinge. Now Minato looked like a painfully average man with flat brown hair and no standout features at all. "Now that is done I will be back in a few hours. Tell Kushina where I am going." Genma nodded as Minato jumped into the forest that lied just beyond the shore. Nearby forest an hour later. After a few minutes of running and jumping through the trees, Minato was able to find a major road that was of a decent size and seemed too well maintained. These tracks seemed to point to a settlement or a town if I head north. So he walked for an hour at a civilian's pace, and the closer he got to where he thought was his destination, he decided to put on a powerful chakra suppression seal to sell his henge even more. He was glad he did because after just 30 minutes after applying the seal, he felt several presences coming towards him at a rapid acted normal and didn't react when he saw 4 white blurs fly past him in the trees. Kumonin, thought Minato. Great, that can only narrow down how many places we ended up in, and I am not looking forward to finding out now, but he carried on. In order to find the way home he had to find out where he was starting in the first place. Eventually he made it over a large hill and found his destination. A large port city that from a distance seemed to be quite busy with trade ships and military ships docked all around the bay and in the port itself. Lightning's navy, thought Minato. Well, I might as well try and get a few supplies for the rest of the journey, they won't even know him there. An hour later, Minato embraced the sounds of bustling marketplace as he made his way back towards the southernmost gate of the town. Through some good old-fashioned investigating and clues found around the town, he found out he was in Kyuubi. The one place where Kumo would be focused on right now. Just my luck that this would be the one place we would end up, Minato apologized as he bumped into a little kid that was playing with his friends. At least that means that there is at least a force of Leaf Nin somewhere nearby, that is if Rin's report is still up to date. He was broken out of his thoughts when he stopped in front of a clothing shop. "The Stormy Dragon?" Minato asked out loud. He heard bell jingle, and out came an old man, who was clearly a tailor with a smile on his face. "Hello mister, come in and check out our wares." Minato started to rub his hair in an embarrassed fashion and smiled. "No thank you kind sir, I don't need any clothes today, although I wouldn't mind finding something for my daughter." He trailed off and thought about a gift as a way of saying congrats on training so hard. If there was one thing that came out of Naruto's death, it was the fact he always pampered his only child. The man looked on in a confused manner. "But sir, what do you mean you do not need any clothing? Your cloak is soaking wet." It was then that Minato took a worried and surprised expression. "How can he know that? My hedge covers my cage cloak." Wanting to change the subject and move the conversation inside, Minato agreed to come into the store to buy some clothing. Just minutes after they went inside, a squad of Stormnin passed by the shop on their way towards their shift on the border with Fire Country, each of their masks resembling a bird. While Minato was busy trying to figure out how the old man saw through his hedge. He saw something that snapped him out of his thoughts. It was special outfit that was displayed in a glass case. The outfit was composed of a black camo print flak vest that fit nicely over the thin blood red and black jacket. The black forest Anbu pants looked good with the rest of the outfit as its black camo print would help the wearer blend into dark, natural backgrounds or environments. While the sandals and 2 back pouches were standard for shinobi, it still looked good with the rest of the outfit. Minato also noticed a slot in the jacket for a katana or short blade. Well, the outfit looked really nice. What surprised him was the name of the outfit. "Uzumaki Special?" questioned Minato. With speeds that looked almost as fast as himself, the tailor was immediately right next to Minato to explain. "Yes, this is one of mine, if not my best work. Micro-weaved fibers and integrated metal plates in the jacket and flak vest will protect against traditional blades and kunai. The pants have integrated knee pads and additional padding to help comfort the wearer when crouched down, and the fabric and pocket layout is the same as Forest Anbu, so you know it is effective." The man clearly spoke with great passion about his creation, and it was clear it was designed with great care. Minato inspected one of the metal plates in question that was on display, and he was quite impressed with its workmanship. "These plates are very well made. Who did you get to make these?" "Oh thank you, but I crafted them myself. I used to be something of a blacksmith, you could say, back in the day, but that is old, almost forgotten history now." Minato raised his hinged eyebrow. Minato knew enough about blacksmithing to know this was no ordinary work by an amateur blacksmith. His special kunai took the work of nothing short of a master in order to be battle ready. But Minato put that information aside for now as he wanted to know only one thing. Why is it called the Uzumaki Special? The old man's face brightened up even more, if it was even possible. "Why, it is named after a young man who saved me and my grandson Inari's life. We were attacked by bandits on our way to settle here, and he charged them with only a rock and came out on top. He even led us back to the town, and all he asked for was an outfit fit for a legend. I designed it for him and have been selling it to a few of the richer genin that the village produces." The young boy's name was Naruto Uzumaki. Minato paled. He started to sweat and had to make sure this wasn't some cruel joke. What did he look like exactly? The old man squinted at him as if he was judging him worthy of the information or not. "Well, he looked like a younger version of you shinobi, sir." Minato's eyes widened in shock. Minato couldn't breath or think once he heard the next thing. But the only difference were the set of 3 whisker-like marks on each of his cheeks. Now Minato was on the verge of fainting, but was beyond excited at the prospect of finding his son, but these thoughts were deflated when the old man spoke again. Of course he isn't in the town anymore, he left soon after, and we never saw each other ever again. Minato deflated, and it was obvious that Naruto's trail was cold. But not dead. He thought with glee. He was already planning on leaving quickly to tell Kushina the good news when a thought entered his head. "Hey old man, do you have this outfit in a smaller size and for a girl?" The old man merely smiled in response before leading him into the back room. Southgate 40 minutes later. Minato had several sets of the Uzumaki special sealed away ready for his daughter and a few provisions to see them the rest of the way to Fire Country's borders. It was clear they would need to move at a civilian's pace in order to avoid the constant shinobi and samurai patrols that were constant. He was sure he had been almost found out several times, but it appeared to be a false alarm each time. Now all he had to do was make it past the gate guards again and he was home free. He was so caught up in his thoughts about Naruto being alive and his daughter's new outfit that he didn't realize the guard was calling to him. Shit. Time to improvise. The guard that stopped him was a large bulky man in standard Chunin attire. He was an oddity in Kumo, given most of their shinobi were thinner and more agile than this man. He spoke with a rough and clearly battle-hardened voice. "You there. You should pay attention to your surroundings. Where are you heading?" Minato pulled off his trademark smile and rubbed his head sheepishly. My apologies, shinobi sir. I am merely thinking of what I am to do for my wife and I's anniversary that I forgot about. Surely you can understand." The guard shook his head knowing the plight of every man known as a wife. He had his waiting in Kumo after all. "Fine, I would ask for your ID, but I doubt you will be alive by tomorrow morning." He laughed at his joke and waved him though. As Minato was a little ways away, the other Kumonin on duty walked up to him. "Hey Shy, you think that was a good idea? You should have probably checked his ID. Lighten up will ya? Who do you think he could have been? The 4th Hokage?" Both of the men laughed at the joke, not realizing how right they were. Ashore, some hours later, once Minato was sure he would avoid any upcoming patrols, he released his henge and had run non-stop to his wife to tell her the good news about their son. Once he finally broke through the tree line and onto the shore, he immediately called for everyone to gather what little of their things that survived the crash and to get ready to move out soon. Kushina walked up to her husband with a curious look on her face. "What that look on your face for? You look like you struck the lottery." She had a small smile herself as that was one of her favorite features about him. His addictive smile. "Kushina, I found a trace of him, he's alive." He shouted that last part a little too loudly and everyone on the shore stopped what they were doing in order to listen into what they were saying. They were ninja after all. Minato slowed down. "Who's alive?" "Naruto. I found a guy who was saved by Naruto." Minato had a smile so bright his eyes were closed. That was why he didn't see the fist that was about to impact with his head. Minato was in the center of a small crater on the beach. Sand was all over him and he was disoriented. He looked up to an enraged Kushina with fire in her eyes and her hair in the form of the 9 tails. "Kuke Kushina, why are you mad?" "Minato. You idiot, that is not something to joke about. The death of our son is not something to make fun of." "And no Kushina, you don't understand, it's true. I found a man who was saved by him and even designed an outfit for him, look." He showed her the outfit he had bought from the old man and her eyes started to water up as she cried her eyes out for several long minutes. Even Eri and Rin were tearing up a little at the revelation that Naruto was alive. Eventually everyone left the couple alone to cry their tears of joy and finished packing.